And we'll start with singing our national anthem. All please rise. Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love, in all thy sons command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Scott, have a spare pen. Yes. Thank you. Good evening and welcome. Thank you very much for appearing. Madam Clerk, do we have any addendum items?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, there is one this evening that I would like to draw attention to. It's the William Gordon has withdrawn his delegation request for this evening concerning item 8.
Thank you. Could I have a motion to confirm the agenda? Moved by Councillor Desmarais, seconded by Councillor Kenny. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Are there any disclosures of interest? There being none noted, we'll note that in the minutes. Can I have a motion to adopt the minutes of the regular meeting of Committee of the Whole 22-15 held on September 28, 2015? Moved by Councillor Bodner, seconded by Councillor Main. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Move on to determination of items requiring separate discussion. And in this case, I perhaps would ask Councillor Desmarais to choose item number 1. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Doucette.
Number 5, please.
Councillor Main.
Number 3, please.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. Items 2 and 11.
Any other items? Request a motion approving those items not requiring separate discussion. Moved by Councillor Kenny, second by Councillor Doucette. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Are there any presentations tonight? None this evening, thank you. Delegations. Councillor Barrick, could you come forward, please?
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In lieu of my regular regional councillor reports, I'm happy to take the opportunity to introduce both the chair of the Police Services Board as well as the chief, Jeff McGuire, is in attendance as well. And one of my many roles, one of them is a member of the Police Services Board. And it's a pleasure and an honor to work with a great team at the Niagara Regional Police. And perhaps the clerk could check the record books, but I believe this may in fact be the first time that a chair of a Police Services Board and a chief have presented to City Council in Port Colborne, so I'm pleased to be able to introduce both of those individuals. At this time as well, I'd also like to publicly thank the chair, Bob Gale, for supporting keeping District 6 open over the next few years for this term of council. I know that's something that's critically important to you as a city council as well. And Bob, as chair, I'm happy to say supported that decision. And so with that, I'll take the opportunity to introduce our chair of the Police Services Board, Bob Gale.
Looking forward, Mr. Gale. Also, Councillor Andy Petrowski is also with Councillor Gale this evening, also a member of the Police Commission.
Yep. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me here, and staff. Also, I'd like to introduce Andy Petrowski, who's the Vice Chair, who I'm going to go back on that. It was Dave Barrick's idea to keep the Port Colborne Police Station open. I was just a supporter of it when the facts came to me. It was an easy decision for the identity of Port Colborne. Plus, I don't mind saying Port Colborne's my second favorite city in the Niagara region. I'm not artificial in anything I say. You know, we have mutual friends by Rathbun Inn, and I spent most of my childhood running up and down Tennessee Avenue looking at the houses. I know they've depleted a little bit since then, but we also have Chief Jeff McGuire, as you know, Staff Sergeant Chris Healy, and Deputy Brian McCulloch here. We're somewhat of a traveling roadshow going to every council for the next, and then we'll keep it for the next month. And this was brought on by a dispatch motion I wish to bring, but the chief wisely suggested he come to, and we field any questions that you have. Any questions you have on it. If we don't have answers, we will get back to you. If we don't get back to you, I'll give you my email address. We will get back to you. I was elected to make change for the better. I could be wrong, but you've read about us in the papers and that. We're not here to be vanilla, and that we look at, we're looking at everything if we can. That being said, I'd like to start on about the dispatch motion, if you don't mind, that I'm bringing about, and I hope you'll support it, because I think it's common sense. Second, the chief will come up. Hopefully it's the chief coming up to answer your questions on policing and that, if there's anything I can add to it from a police board standpoint. Police board, money, control, the chief is operations. So the operations are where most of your questions are coming from, that point. But back in December 2015, as a newly elected person, we took a tour, and I believe you were with me, Mayor, on the bus going around to the different sites, and we did a tour of the EMS dispatch station in Niagara Lake, and I looked at the beautiful dispatch consoles and that, and I recognized the police have it and the fire have it and that, and I looked at the duplication on things. I also remember the Ryan Dubé inquiry in Niagara Falls, where a judge in the hearing for it said there was a disconnect between the Niagara Parks Police, the Niagara Falls Fire Department, and EMS, where they all had different radio frequencies, different this, different that. I'm not here to blend, but I'm here to try and make it more efficient. So when we were on that bus tour, I turned to Dr. Val Yeager, who's the Doctor of Health for the region, and I said, would it not make sense to bring these items together, the dispatches together? Wouldn't that save response time and save money? And she said yes and yes. I said, then why has nobody done this? And she says it's complicated. So I looked at complicated, I realized employment issues, I realized all these things. So I brought it to council, and I made a comment in council saying, this is a common sense thing we would do in business, but I recognize we have labor contracts out there with people. I recognize that a lot of people, St. Catharines in particular, who does your dispatching, and that I believe that's the case, Chief, and that they all have new equipment. I talked to some of the radio dispatch people with the new headquarters for police station in Niagara Falls, and we figured some of this has a life of 6 to 7 years. So when I went to regional council, I said to them, you might think I'm in a hurry, but I recognize that these things take time. So why don't we have a plan to put these together when your radio unit goes for St. Catharines Fire Department, EMS, or police, look at it about amalgamating the services so we can bring it under one roof. I've been told fire and police can't be on the same channels. I imagine your chief's going to say the same thing, and I get it. But in the same building, you don't have a disconnect. Less management, you can have the same systems, but different channels, things like this. I've been told this can be done. So then they told me there was a CBI report. I'm going to offend you, at least I hope you're all offended. This cost you a portion of $177,876 in 2011. A CBI report that recommends we merge dispatching, the region take a lead on it, all this pretty stuff. You probably don't even remember it or don't even know about it. I'm offended because what would your portion be of $177,000? 10 grand maybe? And that, what has been done about it? Nothing. And that offended me. So I said, let's move this on. So we had a meeting at regional council. I started the motion of let's bring it together. The greatest fear that the region has was big region coming to city councils and forcing us on you. I don't do that. I had a retail business all around. I don't do that. I bring you common sense, and I hope you'll support a motion to study this and study about putting it together. And then if you don't like it, please argue with me with the facts. Because when I went to the chiefs, Chief Smith from Niagara Falls, Chief Smith from the EMS, and Chief Wood from St. Catharines, they said it's all doable. It's a good idea. But let's look at the labor thing. And I agree. I talked to the union for Niagara Falls, didn't talk to the union of St. Catharines yet. And I said, through, what's the word, attrition, and that, you can make this happen. If in 6 or 7 years, or 8 or 10 years, that we looked at, don't be hiring more people for your communications department, let's bring them together. And if we only get 1 or 2 together, that's even better than what we've got going now. I recognize the EMS is funded by the Ontario Public Health, and that, but it can be done if we try, we just don't give up. This thing here, it's been 5 years, 4 years. Has anybody here heard of it? If you have, then you've been around for a while, and again, that offended me greatly. So my point is, we have a motion. Do you have the motion in front of you, Mayor, that I'm asking you to support? Did someone furnish that to you? Do I need to read that to you, or?
It's on page 7 of your briefing notes, Council.
I'm asking for your support, because what the regional council asked me to do was to go around to each council and get their support on this. They're afraid I'm going to come in here and say, damn it, this is what we're going to do. And I don't do that. But I ask you that if we get all the councils online, I have 2 councils next week, 2 councils the week after that, and we're going to get it together, and we're going to ask for people to come together and have a round table on this. But I hope that we can get some people to do action on this. Now, you are not an integral part in that, and I don't mean to say that in a nasty way, but the big players are the people that are running the dispatch for St. Catharines, Niagara Falls, EMS and that. But we want some outside places because we don't want to lose identity, just like your station and things like this. So we want input. So once we get the support of all the councils, and I hope we would, and I don't expect us not to, I'd like to find out why we wouldn't, then I'd like to form a board. And we study this over the next 2 or 3 years. And we do it pretty cheaply, but we say to you, when is your radio system going to fall apart? Then let's work at putting it together. I was offended that there was some talks between Niagara Falls Fire Department and the regional police about putting dispatch together, and it never happened. This is prior to the chief's tenure and my tenure and that, but it never went anywhere, and this was after this study. But nobody found out about that conversation until a couple years after. So I'm here to try and get that going. Other than that, I don't have a lot to say to you, but if anybody has any questions on this emergency dispatch before the chief comes up, I'd like to handle them, or anything to do that the board might have.
Members of council, yeah. Questions? Councilor Goussette?
I don't have a question of Mr. Gale as much as I'd like to hear from our fire chief the logistics of the whole thing and seeing how it would affect or could affect our own dispatching. How quickly can we get it? Will it work? Will it not work? Is it possible to create problems? I think Chief would be the one that would give us that answer.
Chief Cartwright?
Your Worship, to Council, some of you may be shocked that I'm going to say what I'm going to say, but I've been a proponent of this since 1990. The regional chiefs know my position on this. I think we need to look at it. I'll probably be shot the next time I go to a chiefs meeting, but that's okay. I think there's a lot of good things to it. Quite frankly, the fire dispatch center that we currently use, St. Catharines and Niagara Falls, their equipment will no longer be maintained by Motorola as of 2018. So I think there's a push internally to do something with those 2 agencies. I think it's workable. I don't think it's something that shouldn't have been done a long time ago. Unfortunately, we look at cost, and has been previously mentioned by Mr. Gale, there's issues around union contracts and things of that nature, but I don't think it's anything that we can't overcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief.
May I
That
make
helps
a
lot.
comment to that, please?
Certainly, Councilor Gill.
May I have if this is formed, can I have him on the board? Please. Thank you.
Councilor Elliott?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to the chief. I think you've spoken on this on amalgamation of the dispatch in council before, so it's no news that you support that. Can you just give us a brief synopsis of what the pushback is from the other chiefs Why, is it strictly the job loss that could be an issue that they're looking at, or what's the pushback from the other side?
Again, your worship, the council. Quite frankly, I think the simple word is change. It's change. The fire service doesn't like to change. Police service doesn't like to change in a lot of ways, and I'll say that because the police chief is sitting behind me, hopefully he's unarmed tonight. But quite frankly, I think it comes down to fire services of the opinion that they should be dispatched by fire service personnel, and there's always issues with crossing those borders between police, EMS, and fire. I stand to be corrected on this, but I believe the provincial government funds EMS dispatch 100%. I believe that's the accurate number. So there's some financial issues there that will come into play. But cost is going to be one of the things. If my memory serves me correct, back in 1995 through 97, I started sitting on a committee that dealt with this type of thing. And at the end of the day, I was no longer on that committee, but I believe the cost came back to the regional council of the day. It's somewhere around 40 million to do it at that time. Things are different now because we do have a new police headquarters being built. There may be opportunities there to look at that type of amalgamation at this time. Obviously, you also need a backup system. So if EMS were to continue to operate theirs and police and fire were to join theirs, those are the types of things that I think through cooperative management can be accomplished.
Councilor Elliott?
Thank you, Mayor. And just one other question, and through you to Chair Gale. And Chief had touched on it, and you had mentioned it earlier, that the EMS dispatch is fully funded by the province.
Not fully,
or
not fully.
Portion thereof.
I don't know percentage, but not mostly the province.
Has there been a dialogue
Yeah.
developed with the province to...
I'm sorry, sir?
Has there been a dialogue developed with the province to gauge their response to the merging of all three departments into one dispatch? Where does the province stand? And is there any idea of how much funding the province gives to the EMS dispatch?
I can get that for you. As far as dialogue, I would offend people if I went to that dialogue without getting these councils done first. And there are sites in Ontario that has happened, and the province has gotten together with them. I even had a list of them, but I'm sorry I don't have them here. I'll say there's 5. At the start, somebody told me it's not been done. I have 5, I believe it is, that has been done on it. And savings-wise, and I know reports, we all know consultants. I can paint the sky purple with a consultant, but this report says you'll save about $2 million, give or take, a year. So that translates in my figure into about $100,000 or some dollars per your council, and it should make it more efficient. That's my biggest thing. Even 30 seconds or a minute should make it more efficient when you have everybody coming together.
Any other questions of council? Councilor Kenny, then Councilor Main.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through Chair Gale. You held up a report a few minutes ago that was done in 2011, did
Yes.
you say? How many councils got that report?
How many councils?
Got that report?
This is a report from the Niagara region. I'll make it available to all of you if you wish. I don't know who got it. Mayor Maloney, you can help me on this. I got it from EMS. They said it came to the council. The region paid for it in 2012, but the report was 2011.
I believe the question was how many councils supported that report?
No, received it to read,
We got the report. And
because I've been around for a while, and I don't remember that at all.
well, doesn't that offend you that you never got it?
A little tiny,
offend me.
little
You get it.
smidgen. Yeah. So,
177,000?
I would like to know even if the chief got to read that report. See, and he's never seen it. And he's our fire chief. So what does that tell you?
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not happy. I'll be honest.
That's
with
why I'm
you.
standing here in front of you. And I don't like the idea I have to go to all the city councils, but I'll do it. I'm doing it for my grandkids.
Yeah.
And
Well, I've got 5 of those too, so.
I have 2. I'll catch up.
Okay, you'll catch up, okay. I may surpass you. That's just from one child. We got
Are we
another
going to bit off a little bit?
But anyways, I would like a copy of that. And
Not a problem. I will-
I'm sure every councillor here would like a copy, so
I'll get copies for you.
you'll make it available for us. That's
Please.
great.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank
Councilor
you.
Desmarais? Oh, I'm sorry. You're right.
Thank you, Councillor Main. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Gale, I would also like a copy of the report, obviously.
I'll get it for you all.
This is a really important issue, there's no question, and there's a lot involved. I would like to hear comments from our regional councillor on this, and we've heard the fire chief, and I have great faith in how he directs his staff and the decisions he makes for our safety. So I would be inclined
Might
to go along
sound like
with
a
that.
setup, but I've never met the man before, so.
Well, I managed to have a lot of conversations with him, so yes, I'm good with that. But I would like to hear a few more people speak on it because it is,
Yes.
it's a big step. So.
Councillor Main.
Yeah, this is just quick, and thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Mayor. And I don't know who can answer it, but when I call 911, do I talk directly to the fire department dispatch, the police dispatch, or the EMS, or just another layer of dispatch to get to the dispatch?
That's operations. If you don't mind, I'll defer to the chief on that
Okay.
question. I have my own opinions, but he has the right answer.
Okay. All right.
Chief, could you come forward, please?
Thank you very much. If you need me, I'll come back up. Is that, or do you want me to stay here?
No, you sit down, thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for welcoming us here this evening. In relation to that particular question, you dial 911, the call comes into the police dispatch center. The region has a responsibility for answering 911, but they delegate that authority to the Niagara Regional Police Service. So we take the original call, and what you will generally get first, when they answer the phone, the operator will say to you, do you need police, ambulance, or fire? And then it instantly goes from there. It'll be passed on to one of the two dispatch centers for fire, if it's fire, onto the EMS dispatch if it's us. If it's a police matter, we stay in. Our dispatchers, our call takers will stay on the line for a certain period of time to determine, because oftentimes we all end up at the same scenes, and so we'll determine whether or not it's a police required response as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions of the chief on this issue of dispatch? Councillor Merrick, do you have any comments on this issue? Councillor Demery thought that she'd like to hear from you as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Only that I support the process of engagement and information gathering, and then subject to additional information. But conceptually, at this point, I'm in favor of looking at this. It makes a lot of sense. However, we don't have all of our homework done yet. That's the stage that we're trying to get to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Perhaps I might entertain a motion to refer this back to staff for a report. Yeah. Mr. Doucette, seconded by Councillor Demeray. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you very much. Oh yeah, I haven't forgotten the chief. Thank you, Chair Gale. Thank you very much in your capacity tonight. Chief, thank you for coming forward again. Do you have any comments on the policing issue, or are you ready to take questions now? Or do you wait?
I had a little bit of highlight that I thought I'd give you on the policing issue. I would like to say, just in relation to the dispatch report, though, it is very comprehensive, and if you haven't seen copies, Chair Gill did indicate he'll get them to you. There are, it is a report of regional council. And there are a number of recommendations in there as well. It's not just the combining the dispatch. There's also discussions about infrastructure. And we have recently, the police service has recently contracted, and we've purchased a new radio system to replace our antiquated system. And we did that in the design process to design the infrastructure so that it would have the ability, when the fire departments came forward through St. Catharines and Niagara Falls, as their system needed to be replaced, that there would be an opportunity to have discussions about using our infrastructure rather than going out and purchasing a whole new infrastructure. And we're still in that discussion. As recently as within the last week or so, the deputy and I have had discussions with the chiefs of St. Catharines and Niagara Falls Fire Department about that. So there are things in that report that are underway. It's not the combining of the dispatch center has gone through discussion process, hasn't moved forward beyond that. But there are other things in there that have taken place. So I just wanted you to be aware of that.
Perhaps I might ask Staff Sergeant Chris Healy to come forward. There may be
Sure.
questions put to you.
Well, you know, because I'm glad you called him, because I'd be calling him as soon as you started with your tough questions.
Okay.
And as it was indicated prior, Deputy Chief Brian McCullough is in charge of our operations side. Brian is here with us this evening. Chris is very tall, as you can see. Chris is here on behalf, he's the unit commander, obviously, of the district that polices. So, you know, I can give you a little speech about what's going on. You probably know more about it than I do, or we could field some questions for you. I'm completely in your hands, Mr. Mayor. How'd you like to?
Perhaps if you would take some questions.
Certainly.
Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, thank you for coming out tonight and speaking with us, and Sergeant Healy, thank you as well. This is a question for both of you, and you can answer it at will, whoever wants to take it. But we've had some real concerns over what's happening in the East Village, and as a result of a request that I made, policing has been stepped up considerably, and there's a much stronger police presence in the community, and that certainly doesn't take care of it all, but it is a step toward resolving many of the issues in the community. So what I'd like to do now is possibly get an update from either of you or both of you, and you may want to speak to the community. Many of the community members are here tonight, and they know that they don't have an opportunity to ask you questions, but possibly you can speak to them and let them know what you're doing for them, how maybe reinforce that you're not mind readers, and if they don't call, you won't know. Right. That's very, very important. So I'll just give it to you, and you'll say what you need. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much. And I'll start, and I will turn over to Chris, because Chris is hands-on with this, and I'm certainly well aware of the challenges that have been faced and the issues that have been raised by you. Certainly not long before it gets into the newspaper. We're well aware of it. Chris is good. It comes up through our chain of command, a proper method of communication, so we know what's going on at the street level. And I know that Chris has worked hard, and I think you've confirmed that for us to some increase in the policing presence at times when we can. There have been a number of projects in that particular area, a number of issues. I don't know if a lot's a fair word. A portion of the issues that come up, and Chris can speak to a little more, are not strictly policing issues. So, and I'm not saying that that's not our problem, because non-policing issues tend to create public disorder issues, which then do develop into issues that at the end of the day you end up with police cars and fire trucks and ambulances at. And that's what we would like to avoid as well. But I do know that there's been some discussion. I know I've heard the word task force, and you know, I personally, I'd like to find a better name than a task force, because it makes it sound like we're all going to darken up ourselves and get ropes and run out into the streets, and that's not the way that we're going to address community policing and trying to adjust things like that. So we'll talk about that, about how we best do that, and a big part of it is incorporating things like the bylaw people here from the town, people that have responsibility for things, whether it's if it's vacant homes, or if it deals with squatters or people that shouldn't be there, or drug dealers that are taking over properties that don't belong to them. Those are things that we can deal with from the criminal nature, but we also need to work very closely with your bylaw enforcement people, perhaps with some provincial people if it's relying on alcohol and gaming or those types of things, so we can bring them all together. But I think you did comment, and I did see in some emails that the councillor was happy that it's seen some change and seen some things moving forward. I would like to comment on the reporting issue. It is absolutely essential that crime is reported to the police. We need to get the call, and it doesn't mean that every time you make the call you're going to be completely satisfied with what happens. We're going to do the best that we can to respond to those calls, try and satisfy, and if it needs to bring in other people from, as I said, other areas to assist, then we'll do our best to do that, work with the community, whether it's neighborhood watch type things, any things along those lines, we can do that. But if there's crime that's occurring that's not being reported to the police, as the councillor so correctly said, non-reported crime is the biggest challenge to proper police deployment. Because if we don't hear about it until after the fact, or even not at all, and it's not formally reported, then it doesn't come into our deployment model and identify areas where we need to dispatch people and address things. But if I could, I think I'd like to let Chris maybe just top up and tell you what's been done to this point and what we intend to do as we continue working with the community as we move forward.
Chief, perhaps before you leave the podium, are there any other questions?
I'll hang around if there's more. I'm not going anywhere.
Councillor Desmarais, are you finished?
I just wanted to say one thing, that there are escalating situations, and certainly we do understand that many agencies will be needed to take care of them. Since community policing was taken away, we did have that committee here that met in Port Colborne. Right. The reporting doesn't get done the same way. So if you will have patience with us, we'll get back to being able to report on a regular basis and make sure you're aware.
And for sure, and just so there's no mistake, like community policing hasn't vanished. I know, I think what you're referring to, the community policing committee and the such, but you'll also be aware that Superintendent Scott McLean has been working very hard. We had a meeting in this very room some time ago about the hub model, about bringing people together, and we appreciate it. Nothing's happened quickly, but a lot's going on behind the scenes. So there was issues with making applications for provincial grants. There was other issues about how do we narrow down the field and stuff. So Scott McLean, I think Brian is still working on that. That hasn't gone away. And so if we can get that functional, it is working in other areas, and it brings all that multidisciplinary group to the same table to address issues as they come up. So, okay. Chris, if you just want to say something and make me look smart.
I guess it was probably about 3 weeks ago that you contacted me in regards to the concerns that the citizens of the East Village have brought forward to your councillor. Councillor Demarais and I sat down, had a meeting at the police station here in Port Colborne, because she had pre-informed me of some of the concerns that you had. Some of them was allegations of drug use, drug trafficking. As a result, I enlisted some aid from our 3-district street crime unit. That's basically our local street crime unit that handles the street level drug complaints. So we had our officer in charge from that unit come down as well and met with the councillor. We discussed some of the issues that she brought forward. In all honesty, some of them do pertain to a policing issue. Others require the involvement of other agencies. Certainly, you have several issues there. I would suggest it will be a multi-agency approach that will help to alleviate some of those concerns that you have. As an immediate fix, the police here at 6th District, we initiated extra visibility in your area. There's an extremely dedicated group of officers that work out of Port Colborne, and they were made aware of your complaints that you had. Some of them, they were aware of some of them. Others was new to them. But through their visibility, which I think we got some notice that you hopefully see some more police officers around, and from the feedback that I've got, you have noticed more officers around there, or at least an increased visibility in those officers. With that in mind, her concerns that were brought forward to me, I brought it forward to the officers that work out of 6th District, so they're aware as well. So they could take a proactive approach, so that way they're aware of the situation, and if they see something over the course of their general patrol duties in your neighborhood, they might be able to link it to some of your concerns, which would certainly help advance some of the things. There's some instances where we get called as an immediate response, and in those cases, we may be able to offer a solution right at that time. There's some other cases where they require a little more extensive investigations. So unfortunately, I can't promise you an immediate response in those cases, but it's something that we will continue to work on from an investigative standpoint. There's certainly framework that the police themselves have to operate under. We're bound by legislation as well as everybody else. Like I say, I can't offer you a quick fix. I can offer you that we will work with you together to hopefully address some of the issues that you have. One thing that has caused me a bit of concern is citizens inquiring about taking matters in their own hands. We don't tolerate vigilantism, for lack of a better word, and unfortunately it doesn't offer a solution to what the issue is. We're willing to work together with you, but we will maintain an impartial balance between the situations. Like I say, collectively I believe we should be able to deal with your issues, but it may take some time.
Any questions of staff, Sergeant Healy? Councillor Kenny?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for your ongoing work in that area. However, in talking or hearing some of the people talk, not talking to them personally, I heard about a crystal meth house that they say police are aware of over on the east side. And I guess I would ask why in the East Village that has not been addressed or not been taken care of. Don't they I know you do great police work, don't get me wrong, but I know when you hear in areas where they do a total sweep, they just go in there and take action. I want to know how much, maybe the chief, maybe you're the best one, how much money they're going to put into this so that these people feel safe, because they don't feel safe.
Yeah, well, our budget is set. Our budget is set on the dollars that we have, and it's so that doesn't change. There's a certain amount of money that's set to assign the number of police officers that work out of the Port Colborne detachment, but we also have other units that do work. And I can tell you that when you talk about crystal meth, I see on our morning reports, I get a morning report every morning on my phone from the duty inspector, who's the manager at night, and almost weekly, frankly, there are crystal meth arrests. Or there are some houses that have been taken. So I'm sure there's not just one house. There might be one that you're hearing a big challenge about, but there will be more than one, and I don't think anybody would argue with that. It takes time. The police can't just walk in the door because people say there's a crystal meth house. It takes a great deal of time to build sufficient grounds for us to operate within the jurisdiction, as Chris mentioned, within the law, to get search warrants, to have proper authority to stop people and search them, to make arrests. So those things take time. And I could tell, they've supplied me with some information tonight from stats from years gone by, and there have been a number of meth houses, unfortunately, that have been taken out in that area. And this may be something else that can be assisted by the hub model that we spoke of, where we're talking about, because these are also public health issues. And these are things that, Canada, the federal government needs to help us deal with, and which they will at times. But we need the information, we need the observations, we need to be able to commit resources, and we have. But I recognize as well, in saying that, there's probably still a very active meth house out there that you obviously know of, and maybe some of these people do, and you're wondering, why are there 3 cops sitting here and we're not going to storm that house right now? Unfortunately, we have to work within the confines of the law that we have, and we'll do everything that we can. And if there's more information that can be shared with us, Crime Stoppers information, call Crime Stoppers that comes through to us. If somebody wants to meet with Chris, I guarantee you, I know that he'd be more than happy to sit and have a discussion and get that information, and that's what we're going to work towards more. I know he's been doing it. It sounds like everybody's pretty happy with what's happening, but there are issues that will continue, and this is not unusual in many areas of policing. So I just wanted you to understand that. I just wonder if I could get Chris to explain. It might assist with the people here. Chris, if you could explain how a morning briefing goes. It won't take very long, but talk about the e-parade and how current information and current assignments and directed patrols and such are assigned to the officers.
Sure. Thanks. With our morning briefing, we have 2 briefings a day. We have a morning briefing for our day shift coming in, and we also have an evening briefing for our night shift that will be coming in. At that time, those briefings are led by the patrol supervisor or the sergeant that you would see out on the road in a marked cruiser, and they involve all our uniform officers. At times, we have officers attend the briefing from a specialty unit. For example, we may have some of our criminal investigations officers come in, or we may have somebody from a drug unit come in to discuss any concerns that they see within the community, and vice versa, that the officers can bring forward their concerns. We use a computer-generated program called eParade, and that's available to all the officers throughout Niagara. It's not unique just to 6 district officers, so that could be read by all officers. And what that is very, very much so an information gathering and a referral system. So we could update the officers at a moment's notice as far as any new or developing issues that may be emerging. Any extra areas where there's extra visibility required from the officers, any areas of concern, for example. If they've seen an area that maybe has a slightly higher incidence of crime than what is normal, that's relayed to the officers on the road. So that way they have that information that helps them to do their duties at the day. And if there's areas that need to be paid a little bit extra attention to, they're able to do that as well. There's also information posts for officers. As far as any changes in legislation goes, notations regarding officer safety, or any intelligence information revolving around maybe active locations or active criminals working within the neighborhoods and their communities.
Any other questions of council? Councilor Doucette?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. To Mr. Healy or Chief McGuire. One of the comments I'm getting from some people is the concern for young people. They're starting to find syringes with needles on the end, on the lawns, on wherever. I had an email over the weekend about exactly that. What should the procedure be for that? Because I've told them don't touch them, because we don't know what they are, and we don't know who they're from, and whatever. But there has to be a procedure to eliminate that danger, and I don't know the procedure. I've never been given a procedure to eliminate that danger. What would you suggest would be the best procedure for that.
I know that there are a number of ways that can be approached. There are areas, I believe there's an area in St. Catharines where they had that problem as well, and they actually installed disposal lock boxes for the opportunity. If I'm not mistaken, our cars have syringe boxes in them, so if they are located, so that people don't have to touch them, then they can come around and they can be disposed of appropriately into a syringe box, or it should be in the trunk of most of our marked police cars. That doesn't solve that solves a small problem. It solves a problem with syringes being on the ground. Exactly. And so, you know, at this point, my suggestion would be, if they are found, you know, the other unfortunate thing is, you know, you may be waiting some time for police officers to come around and pick up needles. It may be something that the council may want to address from bylaw piece, or whatever other of your local health department or regional. Speak to the region of Niagara and their health department and determine what other options are available. But I think probably the answer, if it was my own kid, I would probably be telling them not to touch it. And I am able to tell you that the police vehicles do have the ability to do that. It's just, you know, there's going to be times, and if you're talking about a plethora of these all over the place, then it will be a challenge, and then we'll have to address that through a number of agencies, I think.
Any other questions, Councillor May?
This would just be a quick question. I know the whole logistics of having to get search warrants and that other stuff to go and find these labs out. But generally, is the fire department notified in advance that it's a suspected, whether it's a suspected grow op or a meth house or a meth lab, so that at least, because I've been involved in a fire that the guy was cooking meth, and I think you remember the one I'm talking about. Is that protocol? Does the fire department in on that conversation as well?
At the very beginning, probably not. We do have memorandums of understanding with I believe each of the municipalities in the region as to how we deal with the cleanup of grow ops once they're found and located, and who's responsible for what. And those are all signed memorandums of understanding. And I'm fairly certain that they're all complete right across the region now. I know it started, they were just starting it when I arrived here about 3.5 years ago. I mean, if we received a call and we were aware of what was going on, then we would share that information with responding fire departments. But I don't know that if we have a suspicion that there might be a meth lab somewhere, I'm not sure that information would get to the fire department right off the bat. Because we may not even be aware. It could be a casual conversation. I mean, if we were preparing to do warrants, I would expect that the local fire department and EMS would be notified if we're doing warrants on labs. I'm sure that's part of our protocol.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This will be to Mr. Cartwright, Chief Cartwright. Do you get that information, Chief? Because usually the fire happens before the search warrant goes in. With these places, it's you know, usually that's how you find you're involved before the action or before the warrant goes.
Your Worship, the council, and I agree with what the chief said. There's a protocol in place quite clearly that when they get to a certain point when they're going to access the property, we normally get a call immediately before that happens. And you're absolutely right. There are times when we get involved in fire situations that we determine there's illegal activity taking place. We immediately notify the police. Usually that's after the fact, unfortunately. But if we're made aware of an issue or find an issue, we certainly notify the police as soon as possible. And he's correct. There is memorandums of understanding with regards to the issues around fire safety and intermingling between the police and the fire services and the fire marshal's office within this particular region as a whole.
If I could just follow up on that as well, I would say that oftentimes when you get a fire at a meth lab, we learn of it when the call comes in for the fire department as well. Generally, may not be aware, we might have some suspicion. And I would also, I mean, the term meth labs sometimes is a little bit too glamorous, because as you would know and the fire chief would know, sometimes a meth lab is a pot on the stove and a bottle and a little bit of chemicals. So there's nothing sophisticated about most of them, and that's why they get into dangerous situations. So it's not something that would be completely clearly obvious, you know, from outside the home in most cases.
Any other questions, Council? Chief, I have a couple questions. We appreciate, Councilor Doucette.
Is it possible for you two gentlemen, or at least Chris anyway, to stick around when we have our discussion on the task force? What we have named as task force, because I think maybe your input may be critical in when we start discussing it. So I am just wondering if that's possible.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Well, the questions of council this evening have dealt with the East Village and the situation over there and reflecting council's concern. I have another issue which is of equal, well, it's of concern as well. But now these are ATVs and dirt bikes on private property, on railway rights of way, on our bike paths. And I understand the policy of the police department is not to pursue these if they flee because of danger to the officer, and also liability potential if the offender is injured in a chase. Notwithstanding, we've got the problem. It's irritating to the members of the public who have to put up with this on a daily basis in all areas of the community. And I'm wondering how are we going to address that situation and alleviate the concerns of our citizens?
Yeah, no, and I know that's been a challenge in a number of areas across the region. I'm sure it's provincial-wide too. There are areas that are conducive. You have a lot of rural area or places where people can use those machines, so there's a lot of machines around. Unfortunately, the people tend to use them in places where they shouldn't be used. And the issue with the rail lines has been ongoing long before I've been around, and I know that we've addressed it many times. We've tried to work the same with the Seaway. We've had challenges with it there where we've had to engage with them. And the liability issue, you're exactly right. It's difficult. The officer has to make a very important decision on how far are we going to go with this, because they often, if we get into pursuits, they end up in tragedy, and that doesn't solve the problem, as aggravating as it may be. So we do every year, and I don't know if Chris can comment on, I know I've got some stuff in here on some of the work that has been done. Every year we have educational processes, we talk with people on private property about how to defend their property in relation to illegal activity on there. We have ATVs that I'm sure are signed out here in Fort Colborne to come out and work with them and ride some of the trails and try and talk to law-abiding people that are in the right place. But it's all about education. It's our ability to enforce when we can without getting into pursuits. And it is a challenge, but we deal with it every single year. And whether it's going to go away completely, I don't know if you have any more update on what's happened this year or not. And if you don't, hopefully that's something.
Pretty much an ongoing situation as in years past. Certainly the officers are well aware of the issues that surround the ATV use. And as the chief had mentioned, they try to conduct enforcement and a blend of enforcement education every opportunity that they have. Again, they're faced with challenges when it comes to actually stopping the ATVs. But certainly they're always cognizant of that, and they have issued some provincial offenses notices throughout the summer that I'm aware of. So it's an ongoing initiative.
I also assume with perhaps the use of Crime Stoppers programs that the neighbors can know these bikes leave their home. Many are uninsured, unlicensed, and if the general public would assist you and ourselves by reporting these, and perhaps an investigator can follow up these potential leads.
Yes, absolutely.
And certainly, some of the things, kind of exactly what I was saying, where there have been targeted enforcement programs year after year. But some of the factors you talk about, the mobility of the vehicles for starts, makes it very challenging. Unless you're there on an ATV, chances are the ATV is going to find a way to get away from you, as well as the age of the riders and the failure to stop for police are barriers that we have to face in determining how far we can go to keep up with them. But we do know that it's a problem, and we do have dialogue and enforcement and education pieces every year.
Thank you. Any further questions arising out of my questioning? There being none, thank you very much for your attendance this evening.
Thank you all.
We very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councillor Gale? Chair Gale? You wear too many hats.
Everybody else calls me Bob. We've opened a conduit now for communication, and I'm talking to you people too. You know vigilantism is wrong. You know it's wrong. But if you don't want to send an email to the chief, if you don't want to send an email to the police, send it to me. Send it to Dave Barrick. He's your regional councillor here. You have a fortunate advantage of having David Barrick on the board. He's gone through to the chief with many complaints that he's had before. Give it a shot at least and see what happens. Well, you shake your head, then I'm talking to the others and saying, give it a shot and try us and see if we can do something. You haven't tried me. I've never seen an email from you, sir, but I won't get into the conversation about it. But same with the councillors. Every time I've left another council, they've sent me a bunch of emails of questions of parking, of speeding, and things like this. Use us. We're here to be used. Your mayor has our email, so please take advantage of us on this. We wanted to be here to give you a conversation on this, so we'll follow it up from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gill. I wonder if council might entertain a departure from our agenda to allow, because a good deal of this discussion tonight involves the East Village. I wonder if our CEO could give us a background information on what is happening here municipally so that we have it all in one neat package. Are you agreed?
Sure. Through your worship to council, the staff report is on the agenda today, and I understand that there is a delegate who will appear before council and maybe more delegates who wish to get on the agenda. Staff, I just wanted to say beforehand, staff, including myself, take the issues that Councillor Desmarais raised in council last meeting very seriously. We have a lot of the same challenges that the police have, in terms of how long it takes to get through a property standards complaint or a bylaw complaint, because we do tend to give people, with the property standards bylaw that we have, they get a certain amount of time. There's appeal processes in place. Sometimes it gets all the way to court, and all we get is a fine. We don't actually get a change. I know it's frustrating for staff, council, as well as the public that it takes so long, but we're looking at, staff, I should say, are looking at making some significant changes to some of our policies and practices inside, both before and since Councillor Desmarais read the message at the last council meeting. Some of them will be back before council for approval. So, for example, changes to bylaws that are going to tighten up timelines, make things happen faster, will come back before council, and with council's approval, we can make those changes. The recommendation that is before council tonight for the staff report is only meant to get the discussion going. Because it doesn't support the task force, it doesn't mean that staff aren't serious about addressing the problems identified, both in that message that was read before council as well as today, as well as in the media reports. These are things that staff have known about to a great extent. Not all of them are city issues. Some are public health issues at the region. Some are provincial and federal issues. We know there's things as remote from our office as fraud going on in terms of social assistance programs and things like that. And we need to get those stakeholders at the table too. Staff believe, as the NRP have said here today, that it is a multi-agency approach that is going to be required. And we are one of those agencies, including agencies within the city, fire, building, bylaw, and so on. So basically, staff's position is that we await council's direction on how to proceed based on the staff report 2015-184 that's before you today, and we're ready to get going. Things have already started. I can tell you, staff and I have been working on it for the 3 months that I worked at the city, and we will be back before council with some policy recommendations that will help give us more tools to pursue the issues that have been identified here in council.
Thank you. At this point, I'd like to go back to the agenda. We have a request for another delegation. This is Dee Tilbrook. Is Dee with us this evening? Could you come forward, Dee?
I'm going to, if I may, just read a little statement I put together. My concern is the task force itself. Okay? My name is Dee Tilbrook. I'm a resident of the East Side Village. I live on Mitchell Street. Thank you, Mayor Maloney and council members, for giving me this opportunity to speak and air my questions as a homeowner in the East Side Village. September 24th, I sent an email to our council member, Angie Desmarais, with my concerns as to what's been taking place on the east side of Port Colborne. Councillor Desmarais was prompt getting back to me, I thank you, and held a meeting in the park the next day about 25 neighbors attended on short notice. Neighbors did not hesitate to voice their concerns, frustrations, and anger. During the meeting, I feel as a resident herself of the East Side and caring member of the City Council, Councillor Damaris said she would ask for a task force at the next City Council meeting in addressing our concerns and frustrations. Councillor Damaris brought our concerns to the next City meeting as promised. Councillor Yvonne Doucette also asked the City during the meeting to have an unnotified inspections of buildings. Our residents applauded this suggestion. We have seen more police presence, but what about the inspections? Even though there is more police presence on the East Side, just this week there were more violence and more police calls. That's with the more police presence. Since the City meeting of September 28th, there's been a number of articles in the press concerning the East Side Village. My concern is the article in the Tribune dated Thursday, October 8th, written by Frankie Eichmann, I hope I pronounced that right, titled Police See Progress in East Village. My understanding of the article is that since the city meeting of September 28th, Councillor Damaris, Sergeant Healy, and the head of the drug unit at NRSP 3 District out of Welland met and discussed the issues concerning our neighborhood. In the article, Police Staff Sergeant Chris Healy said officers have seen an increase in calls for service to that part of the city this year over last, and another small increase in September compared to August. It's a modest increase, but certainly something that we're cognizant of. So obviously they are getting the calls. Sergeant Healy also quoted in his same article as saying, drug-related calls are passed to 3 District Street Crimes, which he mentioned this evening, unit, and officers have investigative procedures to follow, in some cases legislative procedures, before any action can be taken. So it could take some time. We're aware of that. It hasn't really started happening till the neighborhood came to the city. So it's been taking some time. In the same article, a recommendation in the report calls for council to refer to the concerns of the East Village to the Healthy Community and Quality of Life Committee to be included as a mandate or a subcommittee of the same. With that possible recommendation, I started researching Healthy Community and Quality of Life Committee. I found an article by Marianne Firth in the Tribune dated March 12, 2015. This committee was talked about and agreed to, I believe, in the month of March this year. I have researched our City of Port Colborne website for this committee to find out who are the members of the committee and what the mandate is. There's no mention of it. I researched the Niagara region. There's no mention of this same committee. If someone can direct me to the information of this committee, I would really appreciate it. If the Healthy Community and Quality of Life Committee has yet been formed, how can the Council, Police Department, and other departments like the Fire Department, Health Department ask us to understand that a subcommittee of the same can help our citizens on the East Side when the committee itself does not yet seem to exist? Myself as a citizen and taxpayer urge our Council for a vote on a task force, not a subcommittee of a health and community quality of life. We understand that there's been an arrest. Thank you. We understand that there has been arrest on West Street, on the west side of Port Colborne, involving crystal meth this past week. Now, I know we sound naive, but this is the citizens speaking to you that live on the East Side. Since this arrest, we are seeing more new faces seeking drugs on the East Side. I hope you can understand that, once again, the residents of the East Side see this as a prejudice towards us and that keeping the West Side safe. I understand because this matter is before the courts. The police department is not at liberty to answer any of our questions, but the question remains among the East Side residents. How come so many have called and told police and Crime Stoppers the actual address of the dealers in our neighborhood, and it appears nothing is being done? There lies our frustration, and we need a task force to be asked for. Please, we're asking you, please, we need a task force. There's a couple other statements I'd like to make on behalf of the other residents. This is a very small group that you see in front of you. The reason that more haven't come out is because they're afraid, they're concerned that there's going to be retaliation on us. There is rumor that already for us speaking up, that there will be retaliation on our homes and our personal cars or our property. That is a real concern. This is a small group compared to what's actually out there on the East Side talking about this. We like to know what the follow-up protocol for reported crimes is. How do I know there was a response? Whether immediate response or investigative. How do we know this? Every time we make a call, is it investigative or is it immediate response? Does the budget dictate the level of protect and serve? Syringes. Now, I had a syringe on my front lawn. I have a disposal unit myself with the nature of the business that I do. I did pick it up. But when we had the meeting in the park with the councillor, a number of the citizens said they called police. They stopped police. The police, they told me, I wasn't there, said that they didn't pick them up. They refused to pick them up. So now we know that apparently they're supposed to do that. We realize that this is going to take some time. We appreciate everyone being here tonight and hearing us out. We do appreciate it. The frustration level is so high over there that I begged people to come to council tonight. I begged them. So many people said they would come. People didn't come because they're afraid, not just of their own personal property, they're afraid for their children's sake. That if they be seen in council, or if anybody knows that they were here as part of this group, that their kids will be targeted. That's how serious it is over there. I thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors.
Ms. Tilbrook? Ms. Tilbrook? Here, just hold on 2 seconds. Perhaps members of council would like to ask a few questions. Okay. Councillor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dee, thank you so much for coming out and speaking for the community. I'm sure you've expressed most of their concerns and done it very well. The fear factor is absolutely there. It's a reality, and we do understand that. And most likely, by bringing it to council and blowing it up the way we did, this has existed for a long time.
This is not being exaggerated.
It probably, and being picked up that way by the papers, it's made it more obvious that there's going to be some pressure put on certain people in the community, and that's creating these threats. So I just ask you to hold fast, and we'll get through it.
We're not just saying that it's a police matter. We're not saying that. We agree with Yvonne Doucette as far as the city also has to take part in this. The fire department has to take part in this. The health department, there's so many agencies that have to get together. But in the meantime, as we are bringing this to the forefront, and the city and the police and the papers are all starting to be aware of what we're dealing with over there, now it's starting that, now all these agencies have to get together. While this is happening, and we appreciate it, we're still living in it. Even this weekend, last night, 2 police cars on the corner of Mitchell and DeQ. It is going on constantly. So you have to understand that there is a level of frustration here, and we're trying to keep everybody calm. We understand that there's a process, but this process should have started maybe a lot longer, a long time ago, instead of us having to come to the city. There was word of vigilantism. I don't agree with it myself. But when you get to that point where the people in the neighborhood are talking about vigilantes, Annie, because they're saying that the police aren't doing anything, no disrespect. They're saying that the city's not doing anything about the squatters. We have buildings over there that are condemned, and we know that people are living in that building. They have no running water, they have no hydro, they have no windows, and they're living in these buildings right under everybody's nose. And more are coming over there. It's not like the police coming and having more visual presence is wonderful, but it's not stopping what's happening. I would like to know how many calls have actually been received or officers have been talked to about a particular meth house. Now, my understanding is you could take 30 people in the neighborhood and all walk up and point to the house. So how many calls have come in for that? And we understand it's an investigation, but in the meantime, they're doing it out in the open. People are going through other neighbors' backyards so that the police don't see them going into this meth place. So now they're using our neighbors' backyards to cut through to get into this meth place. I don't know if you gentlemen were aware of that. So much more going on. If the task force is put together, and I beg you to vote for it, we need the police department involved. We need the city, we need the fire department, we need the health department, we need members of our neighborhood on that committee and have an open dialogue. That way, at least they won't be fearful for coming here and having other people realize that we were here, and I hope my house isn't burnt down. I'm that serious.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. CEO, I wonder if you could just give Ms. Tilton a little background on what the status of the Healthy Community and Quality of Life Committee is.
Sure. Through your worship to Ms. Tilbrook, so that is a new committee that was, I've only worked here for 3 months. In the winter, the city did a strategic planning exercise. Number 1 and number 2 of the strategic plan have to do with quality of life improvements for all residents of the city, regardless of where they live, regardless of their property status, whether they're owners or tenants or anything like that, and really trying to help people. And so a committee was struck, and actually that committee is chaired by somebody who's here today, who is our chair of our physician recruitment coordinator, the person who helps. Yeah, what she said. And so that committee, if you can appreciate this, was the put in motion in March, and it's still in October hasn't actually been had its terms of reference approved by council and started to have its first meetings. So,
excuse me. So how can you ask us to not have a task force to be part of a subcommittee that actually isn't a committee yet?
So, and for your worship, to the speaker, this is one of the issues we're up against. It does take a long time, and you said that you understand that, and I understand. We're trying to do things as fast as we can. I spend time every day at my job working on the East Village. I promise you that, and I do take it seriously. But one of the factors that we're up against is government does take a long time. We have to come to council for approval. So you can imagine if it took from March till October to get that committee up and running, that has, and I promise you, it has building, fire, port cares, public health, police, ambulance, bylaw. They're all on that committee already.
Where is it? Where's the names? Where's the mandate? I don't see anything on the City Hall website.
It's coming to council next month. I think, is it fair to say November? October 26th, our next council meeting. We're going to be putting it on the agenda to get it up and running and finally established by council. So,
how long would it take for a task force to be put together?
I mean, I can't.
Years? Did I hear years?
Sorry.
How long would it take for, realistically, how long would it take for a task force to be put together?
If council was to approve the terms of reference that I wrote and prepared for tonight's meeting, it calls for 3 members of the public, 2 members of council. We know the 2 members of council will be the ward councilors. We would need to advertise for the 3 members of the public. That could take probably a month to, well, it has to be an open, it may or may not be you.
Right.
I mean, that would be great. We open it up. Council actually chooses the residents. It takes 2 weeks out of the list that we get. Sometimes we ask for 3 applications and we get 3. Sometimes we get 1, sometimes we get 9. It would be good if we had a lot of good choices and council can choose the 3 members. That's done at 1 meeting, and then 2 weeks later, they're appointed by bylaw. So realistically, 4 to 6 weeks, probably 6 weeks. Let's say 6 weeks.
May I say? So if we can manage to put a task force together 4 to 6 weeks, and this committee isn't up and running, no disrespect, since March, wouldn't we be better off going for a task force? I think the people really want a task force. I know wellness, but we're looking at a dire situation right now.
I appreciate that, Your Worship. I appreciate that. I understand completely. The task force, that the terms of reference that I've put in front of council, council's direction, my meetings, between council meetings with Councillor Demery, even the words that you've used today, call for a lot of the same members. That doesn't mean that it necessarily shouldn't take place. But honestly, as I said in my preface comments, this recommendation is to get the ball rolling, to get the discussion started, and whatever council directs us to do today, we'll come in tomorrow and start putting in place.
I understand that. I'm just saying that, you know, seeing these quotes in the newspaper about a committee and going on City Hall's website and not finding that committee, and not even, again, how are we to trust this committee when we don't have a list of members, we don't have a mandate? So to even ask us to consider a subcommittee of a committee that we have no information on, do you understand that we're frustrated? That's why we'd say we'd rather have a task force, because we don't even know what the mandate is yet on this committee since March.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Tilbrook.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you have a question of Ms. Tilbrook?
No, just a comment.
Okay. A comment or a question to Councillor Bodnar? Comment. Go ahead. I think Councillor Kenny beat you to it, but well, you're next.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just saying, since we have our health services coordinator here this evening, maybe she could come and comment, because we had, the Chief McGuire come and say it takes more than just the police, and I totally agree it takes more than just the police. And Dee just said it takes more than just the police, it takes the health unit, many others. So if she could just make a few comments, I'd appreciate that.
Sure.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to members of council and the gallery members here. Well, in March, it looked like this committee was to be struck up. That's not exactly true. That was when the strategic plan was released to begin the preparations and reports to council to begin the committee. At that point, we met with the multi-agency stakeholders, as you can well imagine, to meet with all of the executive directors of Port Cares, Public Health, Chief of Police, Bridges Community Health Center, Niagara Regional Housing, to come together and develop a framework of what values and what things that we would look at that we would address. And absolutely, we're at the end point. What your concerns are our concerns, absolutely. My concern is, and I don't know, I saw your terms of reference, and I don't know what your meetings with the stakeholders resulted in with the multi-agency approach. The hub and spoke model is an absolute necessity to move forward, to change. And I don't know what your meetings with those stakeholders were. Okay, it was a very long process. We've met for hours and hours and hours to develop what is coming forward to council October the 26th. So I really would encourage you to look back to what the Port Colborne and Wainfleet Community Policing Committee had. And when you look at what their committee identified as what they felt was critical to a community policing initiative, it's identifying the strengths and weaknesses of community policing initiatives. And what your task force is, which I fully, completely, 100% support, I'm just really, really encouraging you to have a very, very strong governance model. What you are being asked to do is very, very important. And to be able to address community policing initiatives, there's training that has to take place. You need to work with the different agencies. You need to work with the police. And that training has to take place to ensure your safety as well. To ensure your safety, to ensure there's no culpability on the backs of you. And in order for that to take place, I would strongly urge you to absolutely have your task force, but work with the months of preparation work that we've already had with all of these agencies in place. And I mean, I've looked at the models. I've looked at Brampton. Brampton has had a safe city approach where they did a neighborhood safety survey. All of the households were asked to complete this survey, which was critical. And we've been looking at that with our multi-agencies about having a survey come forward. We've been looking at different partnerships and agreements that we could have in place. And I totally understand how frustrated you are, and the level of frustration has escalated to the point where something needs to be done now. I don't deny that at all. But unfortunately, the timing is there's a very, very similar committee that months of work has already gone into, coming before council October the 26th. And I would really hate to see it get watered down into two committees that have a very similar governance structure with all of these multi-agencies. That's my only concern, is that, I mean, I'm happy to do the work for the new committee that's coming forward for the social determinants of health. Absolutely. I'm fully committed to it. But from a healthcare professional standpoint, I would really urge you to look at a very strong governance model.
Thank you, Mrs. Caragillo. Thank you.
Okay.
Councilor Bodnar is first. Now we have Councilor Main and Councilor Doucette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just through you to the residents that came tonight, thank you for coming. It takes great courage to step forward and put yourself out there. And a lot of times it's driven by frustration, and there's the last resort. You got to come out and you got to do something. I think we are talking about a couple of things here that are not dissimilar, but there's the long-term vision that Joanne just talked about for this committee to really ingrain something long-term. But then there's the reality of something that's happening today on the street. And I can tell you that knowing this council and knowing the councilors, I would suspect out of this meeting tonight is going to come some direct action immediately. And you can call it task force, you can call it whatever you want, but I think you've heard from the CAO that there is some things happening internally at City Hall. The police have said that there's things happening. So I think that there will be, I would imagine there'll be some immediate direction given to, officially from this council, to staff at City Hall to up their game on bylaw enforcement and everything else, working within the rules, as you can imagine. You can't just go charging in, doing what you want. And then there's, if we want to form a task force, great. But let's not let that delay us from doing that immediate action on the ground that needs to happen tonight, So I'll just throw that, that's my thought, and I think that a lot of councillors think that way too. So immediate action, long-term plans, but one thing shouldn't hold up the other.
Thank you, Councilor Bodnar. Councilor Main?
I concur with Councilor Bodnar. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity. There are two issues. If you're going to have a healthy community and quality of life, you have to get rid of the criminal element. Criminal element, to me, seems like the biggest concern right now for the East Village. So, I mean, to me, there's nothing wrong with starting a task force if it's strictly to get rid of the criminals, and you can blend that into the healthy community and quality life after the criminals are gone.
Councilor Doucette?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I was going to say exactly the same thing. Joanne, how long is it going to take for you to come up with something that can help these individuals that have to have an immediate fix?
We've spoken, and we've had lengthy meetings with Port Cares, with Niagara Regional Housing, with Bridges Community Health Center, with Niagara Region Public Health, with Dr. Yeager. I mean, we are very well aware of the issues on the streets. We're very well aware of the hoarding issues. We're very well aware of the drug activity. I absolutely 100% agree with Councillor Bodnar. There's an immediacy that needs to happen, but there's also a lot of long-term legwork that needs to happen, and that's where your governance model comes in. It's going to take time.
Yeah, I don't disagree that your committee is extremely important and will develop a plan that we can use. But the fact that we need something immediate is critical.
Yes.
And I mean, maybe calling it a task force was the word maybe we shouldn't have used, as the chief suggested. I don't care what we call it. Mm-hmm. We can call it tiddlywinks. Mm-hmm. The bottom line is we have to find a way to fix this now. And we should have fixed it yesterday. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's the bottom line. So we can call it what we want, but we need to meet. And I know I've already spoken to staff chief for a meeting, Chris Healy. I'm hoping to meet this week with him. And I just arranged it before we started, so Councillor Desmarais isn't even aware of that yet. She just found out now. And I'm hoping that we can meet with some of the individuals here with Mr. Healy, Officer Healy, so that we can let him know what they see on a daily basis. And I think that's critical. I think they need that information, and you have that information. So that has to be shared in some way, shape, or form. And then they need to do what they need to do, and it may take a while. As someone just reminded me tonight, just a little while ago, they figure that you people want it fixed right away, and it's going to go away right away. Dee was very clear that it's not going to go away right away, but at least if something's happening, it's a beginning. Whereas right now, they feel that there is nothing there. And that's the concern. That's the concern. There's been some beginnings, but we have to go from there.
Councillors, I've shown a lot of latitude on our delegations and questioning of individuals. We have now moved into the debate stage, and we're beyond that. I would like to reserve any further discussion of this issue until we deal with item number 1, and you can start all over again with your questions. So, Councillor Demery, you're in favor of that? Absolutely. Thank you. Moving on to the agenda, Mayor's report. I have no report tonight in view of the time spent already. Councillor Barrick indicated to me before the start of council that unless there were questions of our council to Mr. Barrick on regional council, that he would not be giving a report as well. Mr. Barrick may have just left the chamber, but we can come back to that if our council wishes to ask questions. Item number 13 on our agenda, councillors' items. Are there any inquiries that I haven't covered yet? Councillor Demeray, then Councillor Kenny, and Councillor Main.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a few items before we tackle item 1 on our agenda. So first, I did get a call from one of the restaurants on Main Street today. They were very, very upset that the proper signage was not in place to allow for the closure of the two bridges. They suffered an incredible loss in business as a result. I did speak to Scott, to our CAO, about that, and he assured me that he would be talking to planning. So Ron, I think you're aware of it, but possibly, Ron, you would be able to give us an update as to what signing we can expect and where it will be located.
Director Henson.
Through Mr. Mayor. The signage, the official closing on the Weir structure began today, so the signage was being put in place today. Unfortunately, as the signing goes up, and there was somewhat of a delay in getting all the signs in place while the traffic was progressing through the detour area, and I understood there were some transport trucks that made their way northbound on Mellenby and then made their way onto Main Street. So that's unfortunate, but we've made some suggestions to the Seaway. They are working actively on getting the internal detour signs in place. I did include a detailed detour map that was approved by the region and ourselves on our previous report at the previous council meeting. So that is being implemented. There'll be some improvements made to the signage as we progress, as we see perhaps holes in the signage plan itself that allows traffic to go through. Additionally, we've also, through the Economic Development Office, we provide a list of all businesses on Main Street that are impacted by the closures of both the bridges. There are 3 strategically placed signs within the detour road which will list those businesses and make all traffic or all vehicles aware that those businesses are in fact open for business during this detour. So that is being implemented at the same time. Secondly, there's a meeting tomorrow at the MTO yard on 140, which we'll all be attending. And that is related to the attempt to detour the larger truck traffic away from the bridge structures in Port Colborne. And that detour will include signs as far as the Peace Bridge and as far as Wainfleet back of Chambers Corners, which will direct traffic, specifically heavy trucks, on a detour route that will include the QEW, Netherby Road, the Town Line Tunnel, Highway 58 and Forks Road, which will allow traffic to actually bypass the main structures, the Bridge 19A and 21 during this outage. So we're hoping that's going to take some of the pressure off the traffic. So all that's in the works. All the plans have been in place, and we're working hard with the COA and the region to get these signs in place.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. And can the businesses expect those signs to be up tomorrow? Because that is what they expect.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we hope the signs will all be in place. The COA were reminded again today that we need to get those signs up immediately, and that is in the works. So we'll monitor that and stay on top of the situation.
Thank you. Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to make, I guess, the public aware, on October the 1st and 2nd, Joanne Ferriccioli and I attended the ROMP, which is really the Rural Ontario Medical Program Conference in Collingwood. And I'd just like to read an excerpt from there. Joanne Ferriccioli is the 2015 recipient of the Larkin Health Professionals Education Award. The Rural Ontario Medical Program is pleased to announce that the Larkin Professional Award was recently presented to Joanne Ferriccioli. Joanne works at the City of Port Colborne as their Health Services Coordinator, and moreover, she works in tandem with the city's Physicians Recruitment Committee to bring physicians to Port Colborne community to provide care to those citizens who are not rostered with a physician and who would like to receive care from a family doctor within the community. In presenting the award, Dr. Peter Wells, Executive Director, quoted Dr. Jeff Remington, a former colleague and family physician, who explains that Joanne is a tireless advocate of medical education and primary care services in Port Colborne and more broadly in the Niagara region. Joanne exemplifies the qualities that the Larkin Health Professional Education Award strives to recognize. The prestigious award is presented annually to recognize one or more individuals in South Central Ontario that is a health practitioner, education coordinator, a learner, or a community member for their outstanding commitment and dedication to community-based health professional education and promotion of health professionals within Ontario's rural and smaller urban communities as a career. ROMP has been funding medical students and residents in Ontario, arranging core and elective medical rotations since 1988. Their mission is to deliver quality, comprehensive rural and regional health professional education by the engagement of Ontario communities. And I was very pleased to be with Joanne when at this conference, when this was presented to her. We all know we have a great staff person working for us for our health. But it was nice to be recognized by the ROMP, and I think Joanne certainly deserved that recognition. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kenny. Ms. Ferriccioli, on behalf of City Council, I wish to congratulate you for winning that award and all the accolades you have received as a consequence thereof. Thank you very much for being a great staff person for our city. Back to business. Councillor Main.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Director Hanson did clear up a few of my councillors' concerns before the meeting, but I have this announcement. It's a media release, the Port Colborne Lions Club donation to the Port Colborne Public Library. In 2015, the Port Colborne Lions Club has been a generous sponsor of free quality family programming at the Port Colborne Public Library. The Port Colborne Lions Club is once again donating funds to support its library. The Port Colborne Public Library is pleased to announce that on Thursday, October the 15th at 11 a.m., and everyone's welcome, members from the Port Colborne Lions Club will present the library with a generous donation of $10,000. These funds will be used to create an outdoor seating area with families. We'll be able to read, play, and spend some time together in a shaded area on the library grounds. And this is a quote from Jennifer. An outdoor seating area in the shade has been on our wish list for a long time. We would not be able to bring this to reality without the Lions Club's help. Jennifer Perry, Director of Library Services.
Thank you, Mr. Mann. Councilor Dash.
I guess signage is the topic of conversation tonight. I'm just going to ask Ron, Highway 58 sign coming into Port Colborne. I think another week or so it should be totally fallen down. I just wondered, it's been months, any sign of something going on out there, please?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Danch. Yes, it's been a challenge, and I know this has been raised several times at Council. The challenge we've had is that the MTO has to qualify or certify a contractor to work on the highway itself. We're not allowed to send it would seem simple that we would send our forces out, pick up the signs, have them reconstructed and put in place, but we can't do that. The contractor has to be approved, has to have a crash truck like you'll see on many of the construction sites on the 406 and so on. So what we've done to date, we've contracted Newport Signs to actually reconstruct all 3 community club signs. There's one on Highway 3, there's one on 58, and there's one on 140. 2 are badly damaged at this point in time. So those signs are all going to be taken down. We've made arrangements with the Miller Group who do the maintenance on the highways in this area, and we've recently made arrangements with them to actually take those signs all down, deliver them to Newport Signs, at which point Newport is going to reconstruct those signs. The other part of the community club issue is the plaques themselves. Many of the plaques that were on there on the original signs are out of date. Some of those clubs aren't in existence anymore. So we're making arrangements to have all the plaques that are on the community club signs current. So when they go back up, everything will be current for the clubs that are presently active in Port Colborne. So having said all that, we're looking for a 2 to 3 week turnaround from the delivery of the signs to Newport, and then have them reconstructed, and then we're going to have the Miller Group, they've agreed to reinstall those signs in the same location. So that's where we are now, and we're hoping in the next 2 to 3 weeks to have those back in place.
Thank you. Mr. Elliott? Councilor said after that.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Mr. Hanson. Ron, we took the trees down on the north section of West Street a little while ago. We still haven't done the sidewalk reconstruction. Any update on that, where we stand?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the trees were taken down on West Street as directed. We did a temporary repair with asphalt on all those locations to ensure that they're safe, no trips there. I've asked our engineering staff to ensure that our concrete contractor, CTC Construction, who are coming back in to do the fall repairs, to ensure that that's on their list. So we'll stay on top of that to ensure that those areas get fixed properly. It'll still be, even the concrete that goes in will still be temporary in terms of the overall sidewalk there. We're not replacing all of it. That hasn't been budgeted. But we'll certainly make the area more presentable with concrete repairs on it.
Councilor Doucette?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Can I have either Mr. Hanson or Ms. Aquilina respond to this? I got a phone call from an older woman today that was upset and partially crying because the leaves, she has a neighbor that is blowing leaves onto her property and into the road, which creates a problem. Now, this older woman, I mean, she's 88 years old, poor soul, okay? But somehow, she wants to know if it's illegal to blow everything over on her property and into the road in front of her house. And I told her I'd asked this tonight, and I think it's important for people to understand that you cannot put your leaves out on the road, I believe. But maybe one of these two gentlemen can give me the answer to that.
Director Hanson? Director Aquilina?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Doucette. There is a bylaw we have that does not allow, same with snow, you can't deposit snow on the road allowance. So it's the same thing that applies to leaves, like blowing leaves on our roads, and the fact of someone blowing leaves on the neighboring property, that it's a civil matter, but we have bylaws in place that don't allow that.
Thank you very much. Then the procedure would be to call bylaw, and bylaw will go out immediately because it's happening right away. That seems to be her concern, because she says she's called bylaw before. No one shows up till 5 hours after, and then, I mean, you know.
Through Mr. Mayor, if you'd like to give me the address now, I will make a note of it, and I will ensure that the complaint is put in place, or you can have the complainant contact bylaw enforcement with the actual address of the matter.
I'll give you the address.
Okay.
I'll send it to you by email.
Any other questions? Council. Mr. Hanson, I just have a comment. An individual spoke with me about the difficulty we have with our two crossings, Clarence and 19A, going down Killallie East and turning onto Mellenby and going down opposite the fire department is the first time they can tell whether a Bridge 19A is up. Then there's a difficulty of turning back and going down towards the Clarence Street Bridge. Is there a possibility we could have a sign, a flashing sign, bring to the individual's attention that 19A is up, so that it wouldn't go down, wouldn't cause any more to the traffic congestion they've got, and then they'd go right on to Clarence Street Bridge?
Mr. Mayor, there's a preemption at Welland and Clally. The preemption, when Bridge 21 is up, or in the moving up, in the up position, the lights are activated, which indicate to traffic that 19A is the alternate route. So if, from the driver's perspective, if you're at the intersection of Killallie East and Welland, you can actually, you're very close, you can see 19A.
Now, this is Killallie West.
Oh, Killallie West, I'm
Mellenby,
sorry, I misunderstood you.
As they go across the Weir Canal and around to Mellenby down towards the fire station.
Unfortunately, from that side of it, other than when we're having this problem with Bridge 19 now, there's no preemption on the west side at all.
But that's my question. Can we have a preemption sign installed for this interim period?
Well, the sign has to be interactive. The interactive preemption sign that I mentioned at Welland and Killallie East, that took some time. It has to be wired in. It's quite an expensive sign, and it has to be tied into the operation of the bridges themselves. We wouldn't be able to do something like that simply on a short-term basis. When this bridge is going to be out until January, it would be impossible just to get something in place for that period, because once 19 is back in service, you don't need a preemption. You either have a guaranteed crossing of 19 or 19A. So it wouldn't be worth the cost and the need to put the preemption at Killallie Street West, because it wouldn't be needed after January. So it's quite an expensive proposition. So unfortunately, in the short term, there wouldn't be a good solution to that, other than to take a look in terms of if 21's up or 19A is in the up position, you wouldn't know that till you made the turn. That's the unfortunate part. But that will be for the next 2-month period.
Thank you for your response. At this time, Councilor Doucette.
Thank you. Sorry about that. While you were talking about that, something else came to mind. I had a phone call from someone, and more than one person on the east side. When they are trying to get across 19A, and the bridge on Clarence is up, okay? One of the things that's happening is that as the people are going to 19A from the center of town, they sit in that round, they come to the light and they can turn right. So what happens is everyone turns right, but when the light turns red, they're all stuck there. Then the person that is coming from the north end going south to the light on Mellenby cannot go into the traffic to get across. And often they will sit there and maybe only 1 or 2 cars can get through. They want to know if we can maybe have a temporary sign that says no right turn on red light temporarily, so that the people that are turning left can turn into the traffic area. Because right now, and I've been there, where I've sat there and waited, and the people that are turning right, coming because Clarence is up, everyone's heading towards 19A. That's the only bridge you can get across on, and they're all turning right at that light. And right now, what's happening is there's some good Samaritans that are letting the people go in from the left side if they want, but there's a lot of people who are frustrated with the bridges and are just want to turn, and they just turn and they're blocking everybody. So I don't know if there's a solution. That was a solution that was given to me, and I don't know if that's even possible, but there may be a temporary light like we see on the highway that could be put up that says no right turn on red light or whatever, and then make sure that everyone is aware of it, because it is creating a traffic jam coming off Highway 3. Because they've got to go that way. If anyone coming down Highway 3's got to go that way to get across.
Do you have a comment?
Mr. Mayor, we could raise the issue with the region. It's a regional road. It's regional traffic signals. They work hand in hand with the Seaway. I understand the issue. I've seen it myself many times. We could investigate with the region the possibility of that. I'm sure it would take a bylaw amendment if it's even possible to do that. Most drivers, just my observation would be, most drivers in Ontario are very used to being able to turn on a red light, but there are places where it is prohibited for various traffic reasons. So I'd be happy to raise that issue with the Regional Traffic Department tomorrow and see if it's feasible to go ahead and do that.
Thank you, Director Hansen. Councillor Desmarais, we're almost ready to move on to your next favorite subject.
I know, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much. I had almost forgot. I would like to have Chief Cartwright speak to how the city is being covered by the fire department during the time of the bridge closures. It's quite important that get out and people know exactly what's going on.
Chief Cartwright?
Yeah, through your worship to council and the people in attendance, and also COGECO viewers this evening. Just to let you know that over the last 2 weeks or so, the fire department has been drawing up a response plan. We met with the volunteers last Tuesday night to make sure that they were aware of what's going on. Over the course of this 8 weeks, we've upstaffed in the daytime. We've got 4 people working. We'll have a truck that's going to be mobile on the west side, west of King Street, and we also have a truck that's going to be mobile, and that's going to be operating on the east side of the canal to ensure that we've got an immediate first response. Obviously, there's other things that come into play with regards to the types of calls and those types of things, but we've tried to provide the best level of protection we can. We may be using the volunteers to stand by more often if in the event our trucks do get tied up. Added to that, as of tomorrow morning, we'll be starting an active fire prevention, public education, public safety program going door to door with those staff over the next number of weeks to promote both home inspections, making sure the homes are safe, they have smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms. So we're trying to build this into something that's a little more prominent. For example, tonight, everybody's out, including the volunteers, doing home inspections and or fire safety review with residents, and that includes installation of smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms. But we've tried to provide a better level of staffing during the daytime from 8 o'clock in the morning until about 5:30 in the afternoon. I can say today we could have probably operated as we normally did. There was only one occasion in which we had Clowley Street backed up to an extent that would limit us to getting across the bridge one way or the other. So we've tried to be proactive rather than reactive. We're going to monitor this, and with the hope that things will settle out once people become used to the detours and so on. One other question that was raised to me by a member of council, if I can just take a second, is that we have raised this issue with the Seaway Authority, and late Friday they sent us an email saying they will receive any billing associated with upstaffing and or installation of signage and so on throughout the Niagara area concerning these issues. There is no guarantee they will pay the bill, but they will present it to the shipping company with the hope that we will get compensated.
Any questions of Chief Cartwright? Being none, I'd like to move on to discussion of the items requiring a separate review, separate discussion. Mr. Maris, you were item number 1.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief Administrative Officer, report number 2015-184, subject East Village Neighborhood Improvement Task Force.
Is there a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Doucette. Discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would first like to say that I would like to see an amendment to the recommendations here. I'd like to see item 2 struck entirely, and item 1 changed to that council receives this report for information and proceeds with the creation of the task force.
Is there a seconder for that amendment?
You got to vote on that.
We have to vote on that.
Councillor Desmarais, our clerk has advised that this is a change of intention of the motion. If you don't wish this motion to proceed, the proper way to deal with it is to turn it down and then submit a new replacement motion. That would be a little neater.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Then I would like to call the question.
I take that.
No?
You can, but I have to ask a question.
Well, the question has been called, which excludes debate on this specific recommendation. Therefore, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed?
You're opposed to this one.
Yes. Can I call that again? The confusion. I'm calling the question on item number 1 as it exists. All those in favor of proceeding with item 1 as it exists? All those opposed? Carried. Councillor Bodner, you had a question.
I don't know whether I can ask it.
I just saw that hand flashing up there, sneaking up there.
I would have voted for it, but I won't with that. Saying it that way. Anyway.
All right. Councillor Desmarais, do you wish to submit an alternative motion for this item number 1?
I do, Mr. Mayor. I would like to put forward that the council receive this report for information and proceeds with the formation as the task force, as directed, and that's it.
Is there a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Doucette. Discussion. Councillor Bodner, then Councillor Doucette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree that we should, like I said, do that task force or whatever. But we still have to some way include and move forward with the Healthy Community and Quality of Life Committee. It doesn't mean that you throw one out without the other. I would have preferred to see just an item 3 added to that a task force. But anyways, I'll leave that to hear from more people.
Councillor Doucette, then Councillor Kenny.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The committee that, the health committee, it's critical that it exists because it's for the city. What we are asking for here is a task force that will spearhead a smaller area, but an area that is in immediate need. And that's what's important here. And should one be part of the other? Yes. And whatever the committee, the larger committee decides will definitely help the East Village. But we need something immediate, and we need something that is going to be active, like Mr. CAO Louis said, by the end of the month. And I think this will do that, and we can get everyone on it that we need, and we can move on. And that's the idea behind this task force.
Councillor Kenny, then Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just really a reflection of what Chief McGuire said, and actually one of our speakers, Dee Tilbrook. And I asked the question of the chief, and she mentioned it in her comments, and that was about a budgetary matter. She said, is it a budgetary matter that we are not going to get the action that we need in this area? He said the budget's been set, and in his comments to us, he said the budget's been set. But he never did answer, can that budget be scratched? Because he doesn't like the word task force, and honestly, I don't like that word. I don't like that word either. But through you, Mr. Mayor, to Chief McGuire, when we take immediate action, that is a budgetary matter to the police. Our speaker tonight, Dee Tilbrook, said 30 people over there can point to the house that really has raised my concern too. That it's a actual methadone manufacturing, meth, crystal meth. Anyways, so if 30 people can point to that, that's a budgetary matter, because you have to send more police over there. Is there money or room in the budget to increase that coverage over there? That's all I want to know.
With the permission of council, may we have a response to that by Chief McGuire? That'd be fine. If we just push the red button on the console there.
Yeah, my reference to the budget is that the police operating budget is set at the beginning of every year, and
Just
the
like
money is
ours.
delegated out. But we do have a certain amount that is assigned to operate the Port Colborne detachment, but we have other areas, and it doesn't mean that we're not going to respond. And 30 people pointing to a house doesn't have an impact on us budgetarily, is what I'm saying. It's not that we're not doing something because we don't have enough money to get there. We are appropriately staffed, and we have cars that can respond. And we do have squads that, as you've heard, that work out of 3 district and the drug squad, as well as intelligence unit. So it's not impacted by budget.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you.
Councillor Elliott, then Councillor Bodnar again. Oh, wait, Councillor Demery will come after Councillor Elliott.
I'll finish it up. I don't mind.
Councillor Elliott?
Thank you, Mayor. And I'll agree with Councillor Kenny, task force. I'm not sure exactly what the residents think task force means. And I'm getting when I listen to what Dee's talking about and talking about action immediately. Even if we pass this tonight, there will be no immediate action unless it's the police. We don't police things. If it's enforcement of the law that you're looking for, you can promote it through the task force, but it's the gentlemen that are sitting here tonight that enforce it. And it's going to go on for a long time, probably before it gets a lot better. When you're talking about the quality of life, and I heard you say that there's houses with no plumbing and no electricity and no windows and anything like that, that's going to take time to work its way through the system as well. You're going to have bylaw go and building go and take a look and assess the situations that are going on. So is there a quick fix? No. We could pass this tonight and we can set up a task force, which I'm not real fond of the name. But we pass it by bylaw tonight. You still have to advertise for committee members. That'll take at least a month to advertise for. You're going to have another couple of, that'll be at least a couple of council meetings, because the next council meeting is the 26th, and you won't have time enough to get applications in for the committee by that meeting and then a decision on that. So the task force will be at least another month, month and a half before it even gets members on it. So, I mean, there's going to be a process that plays out. There's overlapping things that I see that are going to take place between the task force and the Healthy Communities Committee, that how do you draw lines between who's responsible for what? In what areas? I get it, you want a task force that looks after the east side. But you've got somebody that's going to look after the east side, and then you've got somebody that's going to look after the entire city. Where does the overlap stop? If you've got 2 committees doing basically the same thing. Joanne talked about governance. I mean, who looks after what? If you've got a task force requesting things of council, and you've got a committee that's requesting the same thing from council, who do you answer first? So you've got two groups doing basically the same things in some areas. How do you define who looks after what areas? That's part of the governance issue, I think, that Joanne spoke to. A lot of this, I mean, we've heard from bylaw trying to get around to look after grass cutting and different issues in town that they talk about manpower. And I don't want to make it sound like we're not going to look after things. But when we've got small issues like grass cutting and built property standards that we have trouble getting to, there's huge issues there that we have issues, and it's all in the same thing. You can't say that you want to look after the entire community and fix your problems. Part of the problem is crime. A lot of the problems enforcement. We heard from Niagara Regional Police that say that there's a process that flows through that they have to look after. It's the same thing with the process that flows through the municipality. I just don't want people to think that by passing this to set up a task force that it means that there's going to be an immediate fix and things will be better by the end of the year. Things may not get better until next June. But there's a process that everything has to flow through. We are handcuffed by our processes. Like I said, by bylaw. You mentioned about dilapidated houses, about people running through backyards to get into a house or houses in town. That's trespassing. That's an enforcement issue. That's not the municipality. There's only so many things that we can do. And while I support this, I just don't want people. I'd actually like to know what your thought process is and how quickly you think that by setting up a task force, things will change. Where do you think the changes will be immediately, and how quickly do people think that these changes will take effect? And if we can bring Dee back up, because you seem, I don't want to say you talk for everybody, but you seem to bring the concerns of a lot of people through, and that's one thing that I've got concerns with is the correlation between setting up a task force and immediate results. How quick are immediate results that people are looking for?
I believe in my statement I never said immediate. Once did I mention the word immediate. As a matter of fact, when I was addressing everyone, we said that we all know. She can't hear this voice. During my statement, I did say that no one expects this to happen overnight. This didn't happen overnight, so we don't expect it to be fixed overnight. All I'm saying is we are aware of the fact that there is the community healthy committee. The fact that if we are to be a subcommittee of this committee, how are we to know what is going on? Because there's no mandate. There is nowhere for the public to go and see who's on this committee. I understand that you've been putting it together, but at the same time, if you're going to say to the press that we think that it may be under the subcommittee of this committee that hasn't even enforced yet, you understand our concern where, well, what is the committee about? How can we be part of a committee when we don't even know any information or mandate of the committee that they're suggesting us to go as a sub to? So if there is a task force, I don't care what you call it, if there is immediate reaction that the parties from the city, again, it's not just the police, it's the city. We didn't know about, the city didn't start acting until the members of the community came forward to say, we know what's going on over there, and it wasn't until we got here that things started happening. I understand that it's going to take a process. We all understand. But if we had, for argument's sake, a task force, and that we had immediate conversation amongst the players that are involved to start the process of helping us out on the east side, that's what we're looking for. We can't possibly ask us to wait until a committee that was agreed with in March that still hasn't been formed, still doesn't have a mandate, still doesn't have committee members that we can see. You can't ask us to say, okay, we're going to wait some more. But if we can open a conversation with a group of people, the city, the police, the fire department, the health department, the bylaw, if we can start a conversation, that's what we're asking. We don't expect this to happen by the end of October or November. It didn't start overnight. It's not going to be ended overnight. But we want immediate conversation.
You've made your point.
Thank you.
The recommendation has been changed significantly. You're not, whatever we pass tonight is not tied into this committee that started in March.
Okay.
Yes, he did ask you.
He did ask me.
And that's fine. And that's,
are you finished?
Yeah, no, but that's my biggest concern, because the healthy committees, what you talk about is bringing all the agencies together.
How do we know that?
Let me finish.
Let's do our questioning through the chair, okay?
Through you, Mayor.
Sorry.
That's the issue that I have is the people that are going to come together to talk about the issues on one side are the same agencies that are going to come together to talk about the issues on a healthy committee. It's the same thing. You're talking about social services, you're talking about port cares, you're talking about the fire department, the building department, everybody, all the same things are going to be on 2 different committees discussing the same things, although one is going to be tasked with a certain area of town. How do you determine who talks about what and where does the task force area end and the overlap comes in with the Healthy Communities Committee? You've got 2 people with basically the same people on the committees talking about the same issues. How do you talk about governance, which Joanne said, and I'm trying to figure that out. Who decides to do what? And it's not a question to you, it's a question to council, to staff. Who does what, and where, and when? If you've got 2 committees with basically the same structure, looking after the same issues.
May I make a
I'd rather not, Mrs. Tilbrook. Councillor Elliott is giving his comments on the recommendation
Should I
at
sit
hand.
down then?
Please,
Okay.
if you wouldn't mind. Councillor Desmarais, are you finished, Councillor Elliott?
Yeah, I just would like
Okay.
an answer to that question. I mean, you've got 2 committees with similar structure.
I think Councillor Desmarais might shed some light on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To begin with, the Social Determinants of Health Committee, when it is formed, it can be a driving force to shape future policy for the city. That's what its purpose is. That's its purpose, right there. It's not a committee that is put together and tasked with solving present problems. That's what it's not. It's not what that about. It's not about that at all. Not at all. The situation the task force would be handling is building inspections, property standards, fire safety, police matters. In much the same respect as the old community policing committees used to do, by the way, which I sat on for many years. And I also sit on the Social Determinants of Health Committee. So I get what they're all about. And they do not serve the same purposes at all. What we need right now is a committee that is tasked, and by the way, Councillor Manning was nice enough to answer our question about what task means. It means work. What is everybody scared of? That's what he wrote. And I absolutely believe it. It's all about getting down to the work of seeing what the issues are in the East Side right now, in the East Village, right now, and addressing what can be addressed very, very quickly. Not the word immediate, but not the word long-term and not a year or 2 down the line. Very, very quickly. CAO Louis and I spoke about it very clearly, and we talked about low-hanging fruit. There are things that can be done right now, such as having meetings with the police, which I have done. They've stepped things up, and that is starting to really work. That's certainly going to take even more. But with the cooperation with the community and with other people, I'm sure they're going to get more information and be able to be even more effective. So I know that area is being taken care of. Fire department has been wonderful about getting out there and doing inspections when that can be done. That makes a difference as well. Now we're down to our property standards committee, our building inspections. Those are where we need to go as well. The task force would be just those people, those agencies that I've just spoken of, sitting at one table with a list and saying, okay, here's your work, here's your work, here's your work. Go do them and meet. The next time we meet, let us know how you made out. That's what it's about. Gather the information from the community, bring it to that table, get out there, get it done, come back to the table. Very, very simple, very straightforward. We're spending a lot of time winding ourselves up in all this red tape and getting nowhere, and we have to stop doing that. We need to address these issues. I've worked in that community for over 20 years, long before I became a councillor, and worked on these issues all the time, and they never got solved. They have only been escalating, because we've never had a time where everyone was ready to admit there was a problem, get the dirty little secret out on the table, and start dealing with it. We're there now. Let's get it done. It won't be completed forever and ever and ever. We'll have to stay on it. What is learned from this task force, that is going to be extremely valuable to the Committee of the Social Determinants of Health.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Councillor Desmarais. Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Damaris. Are you satisfied that, first I'll say, should we add something to your thought process? Are you satisfied that our staff has been directed well enough to make this a priority from by law enforcement and that? There's nothing in here that says make it a priority. I know you talked about the CAO making it a priority, but this council, I think, should be directing staff to to make this a priority as we form that task force. Like, they're already doing it, but if we say it, they have to do it. So I'll leave it to you whether you think that needs to be added.
Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Councillor Bodner. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodner. Absolutely, that would be a great help. But I must say, from what I've learned, our staff is already stepping up. You're already going to be seeing some action. I've already heard about some of the actions going on. So there is an effect already starting. So the task force may not be formed yet. It may not be formalized, but it's working on your behalf already. It just doesn't exist on paper. But it's already, all the agencies that would be involved in this task force are already engaged and starting to work. But we need to keep it going. So council's direction would be very helpful.
Councillor Bodner.
I'll leave that up to you to add to your, whatever you want. And just to the residents, to defend the two councilors that you're going to be calling, once bylaw enforcement, and please, Dan, tell me if I'm wrong, but once bylaw enforcement opens a file on something in your neighborhood, these councilors only know that it's open. They won't get any more details. So if you're thinking that you're going to want to know where they're working on and what they're working on, it isn't going to happen, because we don't, once that file's open, nobody on council knows what's going on other than it's open. So just, if you're thinking that the councilors are going to know everything that's going on in detail, you're not going to get it. So just so that you don't beat them up over, over not giving the information they'd love to. And sometimes we all think it's wrong, we should know more, but that's the way it is, and that's what we have to deal with. So, thank you.
There has been a suggestion that we beef up the recommendation. Does someone want to come forward, to one of the movers and seconders, amending the Councillor Desmarais?
I would be happy to do that. I would like to see staff direction, council directs staff to move forward with property standard changes that I know that bylaw changes that I know that they're working on already, to move forward that, maybe put a little more emphasis on it, get it moving as quickly as possible, and to step up property standard complaints, that sort of thing. Do what they can to see quicker relief for the residents.
Councillor Doucette, did you? I could ask our clerk to read back the motion as set out for council's consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As my understanding is that the intention of the amendment here is that staff be directed to move forward with bylaw changes and make it a priority, as well as responses to property standards complaints.
And the original part, that council receives this report for information.
And yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, that council receives this report for information, and two, that council proceeds with the formation of the task force as directed.
Yes. You're good?
No, I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The CAO's report also attaches a draft terms of reference, and I would like clarity from council about whether the formation of the task force includes the adoption of those terms.
Councillor Desmarais, do you want to address that?
Sorry, I would think yes. They're probably bigger than we need, but they fit quite well. I would think. I would just like to get some kind of time frame, if possible, on when we could get the advertising out for the task force. I mean, call it task force or not. When we could get the advertising out for committee members, that sort of thing.
Do you concur, Councillor Doucette, with? Now, as far as timing goes, I think that's hard to tie down. I think the direction maybe from the CAO is we'll do it as quickly as practicable, quickly as possible. Councillor,
Through your worship, to Councillor Desmarais, I think that it might behoove council to make a further motion that we post immediately with a closing date of, say, October 31st. Recommendation that, comes back to council November, whatever it is, first meeting in November, by law to appoint, final meeting in November. You could have a task force meeting in December, I think.
Are you content with that, Councillor?
Yes, what he said. Thank you very much.
I'll probably ask the poor clerk Greg, do you have that all? Can we have that? No, I think discussion is over. If we can have the motion recommendation read out, and then we'll call for a vote on that recommendation.
Thank you,
Greg.
Mr. Mayor. The council receives this report for information, and that council proceed with the formation of the task force as directed, and that the draft terms of reference be approved. And that staff be directed to move forward with bylaw changes and make it a priority, as well as responses to property standards complaints, and that the clerk's office be directed to undertake a recruitment initiative with a closing date of the 31st of this month, with a report back to council regarding appointments and public appointments by the second meeting in November.
Okay, everyone understands what the motion is now? Okay, call for the question. Councillor Elliott.
I got a question on the bylaws section. We're changing which bylaws? You're directing the bylaw department to forego other bylaw infractions to look after property standards? What are we directing bylaw to do? And how does that impact what our policy is with regards to the bylaw department?
CO, Louis, have a comment on that? I would assume that they'd be acting on all bylaw infractions concurrently.
Through your worship to Councillor Elliott, that's the part of the amended motion that I was the most unclear on myself. I think that Councillor Demery and I have discussed some staff reports that will be coming forward to council. I don't want to give too much away, but for example, an example of that would be taking cleanliness of yards, clean yards off of the property standards bylaw, which has a very long time horizon, and putting it into a new bylaw called, for example, the clean yards bylaw, that would have a tighter timeline for enforcement. The same way that we do with weed control. That's something that the enforcement officer and I have discussed. So I think that Councillor Demery might be referring to making that happen sooner. I don't want to put words in her mouth. I don't think that she means bylaw complaints in one area of town will be processed faster than other areas of town. And I can hear her saying no, so I'm sure that's the case. So I think it was a matter of bringing forward those things to council. Some of the items will be budget items and will be held over to the budget process, but they'll be treated in the same way.
Councillor Elliott.
Through you, Mayor, to the CAO, thanks. Sometimes when we make blanket statements, it's not clear exactly on what direction we're giving. And just by saying that you're going to change bylaws, blanket statement, and that we're going to direct staff, the bylaw department, to enforce property standards. Those are blanket statements that don't really mean anything. And if somebody hears that has a complaint about something else that's a bylaw enforcement issue, do they think that their issues get pushed to the wayside because we're going to look at property standards? If we're going to define what bylaw is going to do, we need to have some kind of definition of it and what direction you're going to give to them. And to have a blanket statement of we're going to change bylaws. It's the first I've heard of it is tonight. What bylaws are we talking about changing? I mean, you just can't throw that out there and say, well, this is what we're going to do, vote on it, without defining what it is you're asking to change. I'm going to tell staff to go do something that's ambiguous. Staff's going to look at you and go, well, exactly, what do you mean? What direction are you giving them? That's me. But if we're just giving a general statement to staff to do something, how does staff act on it if they don't even know what direction we're giving them?
You had a response from CAO Louis. Are you content with that response?
Well, I heard that there is a bylaw that we're looking to amend. Are there other bylaws that we're looking to amend? When we talk about, we're putting it in a motion that we want property standards looked after, on what level? How, where, when, why? Does it supersede other issues? I mean, I can't vote on something that just says do this. Do it how? Do we forsake smaller issues? Define what's a smaller issue. Some residents think it's a major issue to them, and you're going to forsake that to go look after property standards? define what you want bylaw to do. I just don't understand a general statement of look after property standards.
Well, I suppose we have a couple alternatives. We could defer further consideration of this to a future council meeting. In the meantime, asking staff to prepare a report on this, or we can proceed further. I get the general consensus of members of council that we proceed. All right, I'm going to call the question. Everyone's clear on what the motion is, the recommendation is? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. I understand some member of council requested that Chief McGuire and Staff Sergeant Chris Healy would stay around. I would assume that we're happy that they may leave now. Thank you very much for your patience and time and staying with us. Thank you. Good night. Moving on to item number 2. Mr. Elliott, that was your recommendation.
Thank you, Mayor. Engineering and Operations Engineering Division Report number 2015-177. Subject, Port Colborne Operations Center Design Update.
Is there a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Desmarais? Councillor Elliott, comments?
I'll throw it over to Mr. Hanson if he wants to give a brief update before I get a few questions to ask.
Director Hanson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're pleased to bring this report forward tonight to council regarding the Class C estimates. This is the next step in the design and construction of the new Port Colborne Operations Center. I've left a copy on each of the councillors' desk of the architectural renderings that we just received today from our architectural firm, MSA. And we just had this for council to take a look at to supplement the numbers that are in the report. It gives a good visual presentation of what is being proposed to council as far as the design. Additionally, I've asked members of our design team to attend tonight in case there was any questions of council that we could assist with. Drew Hauser's here from MSA, our architect. Tom Hendricks from Prism Partners, our project manager. I'm Goldstein from Prism Partners, also our construction consultant in terms of the documents and going forward with construction, and Jim Hoopinen, who's the project manager. So I'll give you a brief highlight of the report itself, and then we'll open it up to any questions of council regarding the report. We've attached on this report the Class C estimates, which is a major step in terms of getting this project forward to the tender stage. We've been meeting on a regular basis with our Technical Advisory Committee. 2 members of council, Councillor Main and Councillor Danch, sit on that committee, as well as our design team, and we bring other members of staff in at appropriate times to deal with whatever the concerns are in terms of the design itself. So we're bringing forward this report regarding the current level of funding that was available. We're getting close to expending the original amount of money that was set aside in terms of the soft costs, the design, the facility itself. So we bring this report forward also tonight to deal with additional funding required for the design of the facility and bring forward the Class C estimate. As I said, if you look at page 17 in the report package, we're looking at $7.663 million in terms of the current construction estimates, and also a total cost, including all the design, the remainder of the soft cost of about $10.3 million. There's a little bit more detail in terms of the estimates themselves. We've included the Class C estimate appended to this report. There's also some details on how we arrived at the Class C estimates and how we move forward to Class B and also the Class A estimates just prior to the tendering. Also of importance tonight is the updated construction schedule, which calls for tenders being released in January of 2016 with a construction start in March or April of 2016, and hopefully a move-in to the new facility in early spring of 2017, looking at about a 12-month construction period from the start of the construction. There's also some details on some of the work we plan to do prior to the general contractor coming in, that being the construction of the intersection at Mellenby and Clowley Street West. Of course, with the latest developments with the traffic and the bridges, with Bridge 19 being out and the additional traffic at that intersection, we're now reconsidering that phase 1 construction to get these signals changed prior to the general contractor coming in, and we're going to try to make some additional provisions to have that work done at a later period, obviously after Bridge 19 is reopened. There's also reference in the report to the Canadian Niagara Power high transmission line that has to be relocated, and we're working with CNP to get that done on a cost-sharing basis. We recently, as today, with our design team working on the pre-qualification of the general contractors. Typically in a project of this size, as we did in the Valet Center, we're looking at proposals that were submitted. We had 28 proposals submitted of interest to construct the facility. From that list, we did a complete evaluation of all the proposals and have come to a consensus with our design team of a recommendation to 7 general contractors that would be allowed to actually submit tenders in January for the construction of the site, determine if they were best qualified and able to actually do the work. So that process is going forward as we speak today. That's pretty much a very quick summary of where we are with this, and I think what I do at this point in time is open the report up to questions of council, and between myself and our design team we'll try to answer any questions on the report itself. Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, you just relieved me of one of my questions.
Good.
With the traffic lights at Mellenby. Because I was thinking, please tell me we're not going to do that with all the other issues that are going on right now. So I'm glad that. I guess what my major concern is on page 17. In the middle of the page when it says, noted in the Class C estimate is a cost to shell out the future expansion area at $900,000, which would be an additional cost to the project. And I really have trouble throwing out another $1 million for future expansion to build a shell. And I know that it says that the engineering staff to move over to the operations center would improve efficiency. And I'm just trying to figure out how we get $1 million worth of efficiency to cover the cost of building that. I know that when we saw the basically the detailed designs, there seemed to be an awful large, I'll say, lunchroom, meeting room, whatever you wanted to call that, with room for a lot of chairs to have large meetings. And I'm thinking to save $1 million, we could repurpose that into more offices to accommodate engineering. But I really have difficulty in spending an extra $1 million to build a shell for future expansion when I think that the building is big enough in itself to accommodate everybody. So I can't support that. The one question I did have though was the relocation of the CNP line, and it says that it runs through the middle of the property. Why would CNP run that line through the middle of a vacant piece of property like that when we had designs on it for development of some kind for years? I'm just wondering Did they get permission to do that? And why are we sharing costs?
Through Mr. Mayor. To answer the second question of Councillor Elliott, that line, that high transmission line was put in some years ago. There were no concrete development proposals at the time. This relocation, irregardless of the type of development that would occur, this occurred prior to the fire station going in. This relocation would involve relocating that hydro line along the common lot line, which would be between the operations center and the fire service itself. Any other type of development would have required that this be relocated. Unfortunately, it was put in years ago, and the exact location of any future development on that site was not known, and it was put in on that basis. If I may, I'd like to address, and I'm glad you raised the issue of the expansion area as well. Just to address that issue for council, in the design of the building itself as it is now, there is a lunchroom in there, there is a meeting room in there, and both of those are necessary to accommodate the 50 to 60 staff that are on that site on any given day and using that facility. The thought process is to shell out an additional area which would accommodate future expansion. Unfortunately, this building, as it's designed, does not provide for a future expansion of staff. So somewhere down the road, if additional staff were required in the operations itself, there'd be no room for them to put additional officers or additional work areas in there. So the idea has been brought forward, and we have to make a decision at this time as to whether this will go ahead now or in the future. So the thought process would be, since we're at full capacity at City Hall, there's a strong case to be made for engineering and operations being in the same facility. At that time, when you do that, if this expansion was put in, there would be room at City Hall to bring other staff that are in other areas right now, such as Roselawn, into City Hall to consolidate that operation. There's a strong feeling in management that engineering and operations would be much better managed on a day-to-day basis with them both in the same facility. Engineering would still have the same capability of being connected to City Hall with the new phone systems we have, so that it would be similar to being in the same building. But at the same time, on a day-to-day basis, there'd be more meetings in terms of engineering and operations working together on the various projects that we do work on. We had our architects put together a cost as how this would impact on the facility itself. It's about $912,000, as we point out in the report. But the ongoing cost, and we all know this from looking at City Hall and other places that are at capacity, the ongoing cost to not put this in now and put it in, say, in 10 years' time, the estimate would be about $150,000 a year in additional cost as you move forward. So potentially 10 years from now, if we need an expansion of a facility, we'd be looking at an additional $1.5 million to put this expansion on 10 years down the road, as opposed to spending the $900,000 or so now. So we'd like to make that case that it can be used for an engineering expansion or a future expansion of the operations itself. So we think it's a viable option that should be looked at in terms of future needs for the city.
Go ahead, Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Ron. How many square feet's the shell out of the future expansion area?
Can I throw that back to someone right on that number? I know we based it, just while I looked the number up, we did base it on the size of the engineering department at City Hall, the 9 staff that work here. We took the floor area of that and tried to transfer that particular area over to the expansion. Would you like to come up to the podium maybe? This is Drew Hauser, our architect on the project.
The red button, right? Or am I already?
It's on.
Go ahead. Mr. Mayor, through the mayor, the expansion space is 3,470, And to address the other question that came up about the lunchroom, on the drawings it says kitchen. That's actually the lunchroom. It's much smaller. And the lunch area, it says lunch and training, just because every room has to do double duty in these buildings because they're very tight. So the training component is actually what the primary use of the room is, where it says lunch. But because it's off the lunchroom, it could double for many other things. So when it's not in use, it always can have another use. So just to explain those two items.
Thank you. Mr. Elliott?
So we're talking a 3,500 square foot building for 9 people?
Yes.
That's a whole lot of square feet per person. So I'll just do quick math. That purpose-built building, the admin building, on the construction cost, hard costs, it's about 8,400 square feet. So that's about $200 a square foot. And to shell this out at 3,470 feet for $1 million with the soft costs, because the soft costs were $70,000 with the 912, that gets you to 982. That's about $300 a square foot. How come $100 a square foot difference?
Let's throw it back to our architect.
So again, through the mayor, I believe that when the costings were done, they were done through the cost consultant, and they isolated this as a separate component now. So I believe there would be some more efficiencies. Now remember, when you are looking at the cost of the overall building, parts of the mechanics bays, and they do come in at a lower cost than, say, the administrative bays. So there may be some efficiencies, greater efficiencies that come in. But when it's carved off by the cost consultants, I think they isolated that component.
Perhaps you might just stay there for additional questions.
Sure. All right.
Yeah, and just to touch base with that, you said there was the kitchen.
Yes.
And then there's the multi-purpose room. Well, in that multi-purpose room,
it's a training
room and everything like that. That room's 1,600 square feet, which is a fairly large room.
It's a large room, but when you fill it up with 40 people, you've got quite a few employees, I believe, in Port Colborne. So when this was vetted out 3 times in the programming stages, it was confirmed that that was the size of the space that would be needed. The meeting room beside is actually quite small for a building of this size. So again, if there was a larger meeting, I'm sure that space they would be using. So in order for a building not to be purpose-built, we try and build in flexibility. So we have good floor-to-ceiling heights, and we have rooms that can be flex spaces used for many different things. So again, a space like this, we even looked at different furniture configurations depending on how you would use it for different functions.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ron. The Class C estimate also includes an allowance to reinforce the structure to accommodate future solar panels at a cost of $53,000. Are we sure, we just talked about this earlier, are we sure that solar panels is the way we want to go, and do we need to do that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Elliott. Based on a question Councillor Doucette brought up at a previous meeting, we've done some research through our consulting team, through the design team, with regards to the cost for beefing up the structure of the pre-engineered building, as well as an estimated cost for the solar panels themselves, as well as the potential to get involved with the FIT program and the solar panels themselves in terms of payback costs. So again, I'll throw it back to Drew, but he'll give you a little update on where we were. And we had a sort of an independent estimate put together on what this might entail.
We did, through the councillor, we did follow up on Councillor Doucette's suggestion, and as a firm that has always been entrenched in sustainability, we love the idea of including solar panels. But at the same time, there are kind of checks and balances as you go through a project like this. And this investment, we may be able to have a lot of sustainable objectives that we meet, not putting in solar panels, but just looking at, say, our building envelope is a R20 exterior wall, R40 roof. So it's a very good building envelope. So again, we see energy savings through that. The $50,000 for structure on a pre-eng structure, when they design pre-eng, they really design it for the most minimal amount. There's no robustness in the system. So to allow for that, there's about a $50,000 structural change. The overall, over $500,000 additional would be to actually implement that solar panel program. However, we don't really know if we would qualify for the FIT program. So there's a lot of work and a lot of design that has to happen, and there is some risk associated with it if you didn't want to go ahead with it. So you built something or invested in a structure you may not use, especially on pre-eng. Now, with pre-eng, it's always nice to have a little bit of robustness there if you do end up hanging duct work and other things in future, but they really is quite a fine line for it is something you need to select early and figure out if that is what sustainable items you want to pursue. On the existing project, we've tried to use materials that are all local, including local block, local brick, local steel. So we're really trying to figure out how we can impact our community positively by selecting things that are made locally. So again, we're always looking at all sustainability options, but certainly there's a great opportunity with solar. It just needs to be decided quickly.
Councillor Elliott, Councillor Doucette, and then Councillor Kenny.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The $53,000 on a $10 million building, in case, what if in 5 years from now we have to go to solar? If you're going to put $53,000 in a building now, that $53,000 in 5 or 8 years from now will probably cost you $200,000 or $300,000. Because you're going to have to beef it up if you're going to turn around and put solar. So if we prep the building now for $53,000, we wind up with a building that we can put solar. And the whole idea of solar, and there's some new materials coming out right now that are going to quadruple, if not tenfold, the amount of electricity it produces. I would like to make sure that we're going to add the $53,000. We're going to have it engineered so that if and when we want to go up there and put panels up, we will. Because somewhere along the line, we're going to put panels up there. And we were guaranteed this, at least in my mind, we were guaranteed this in Valet. Now we're told no. It doesn't exist. We'd have to beef up everything. I don't want to run into that problem with this. And if $53,000 is objected to on a $10 million building, on a $10 million project, I don't know. I have some serious concerns about the whole project at that point.
Director Hansen, have a comment?
Mr. Mayor, the only comment was, and the $53,000 would strictly be at the direction of council to proceed with that, and we can certainly incorporate it in the design. All I can say is that we've been very diligent in trying to cut all costs as much as possible and make this the most cost-effective building we can. So we can only suggest that this is a cost to it. If council directs that this proceeds in this direction, we certainly implement that.
Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I have a couple questions through you to Mr. Hansen. Mr. Hansen, how many bays do we presently have on our current works yard? Bays to do repairs?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's currently 2 bays.
And now we're having how many? I'm just trying to count, but
Oh, sorry. Do you want me to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
I'm just counting them.
But they're very different. Like there's four, through the mayor, there are 4 mechanics bays, and then you have several other bays for small vehicle and large vehicle. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 15 bays, additional bays, but or areas where you can park vehicles of large and small. And some of them have different, let's say, temperature gauging as you go along. So there are heated bays, obviously, for the mechanics, and then the heat becomes becomes tempered as you go down to the end, where it's some small vehicle storage and there's just no heat. So that way, we can kind of have very efficient mechanical systems going through the building.
well, I was glad to hear that amount, because one of the biggest things for our workers who have worked, in a shithole for a long time, that's what they have, and to see areas where they can actually do work on their vehicles and do them in an enclosed area is very good. I was very happy to see that. There was one question, or a couple of questions I needed to ask you, and I'll do that, I guess, through you. What exactly is a shell out?
So,
explain that to me.
Through the councillor to Councillor Kenny, a shell out would be basically your heating systems and everything for life safety and your exterior walls completed, and then you would be bringing it. You'd basically fit out the inside when you're ready. So it is safe per the OBC to occupy the space, so you can use it for anything and everything associated with the building. So you can't put a Starbucks or anything going over there. But you can move into it as you need it. The biggest part of, if you were to do this now, is that going out for competitive tender now and adding this into a larger program, you're going to get the most cost effectiveness out of tendering it. So when you have $1 million project later on, you will pay much higher costs for consultant fees, for contractors' fees, just because there's a lot of effort for a small project. So when it's part of a bigger project, it gets more efficient.
Okay, thank you. And just one more was on page 16, I guess, of the report, and that was the cost for the EA update. It says was initially estimated at $15,000, and then upon further review was found not to have been finalized by the consultant that prepared it at that time. Can I have an explanation of what that was?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly. The original EA that was done in 2009 was found to be not only incomplete, it wasn't filed with the province as well. When we originally estimated for our project managers to do a $15,000 update to the EA for our new site, it was simply thought to be a minor update. As we investigated the current status of the original EA from 2009, it was incomplete, it wasn't filed. We ended up doing for the new site a complete new EA, and that cost $115,000. So there was a substantial increase in cost over the original estimate, which was not just an update.
Okay. We don't use those consultants anymore?
They're not currently working on
Thank
the
you.
project.
That sounds great to me. And just another comment, for all of us, having a proper work yard for that department is of utmost importance to all of us. I'm glad you're trying to incorporate all the staff, including the parks, that work yard over here. And if that's what you need to do, that's what you need to do. Like, let's not shortchange ourselves on this building. They worked a long time in really substandard conditions. And I just want to please, they came, they spoke to us, They spoke with their hearts. This is all we're asking for, just a clean place to do work, and I think we owe that to them. Thank you.
Any other questions of council? Are you ready for the question? Councilor Doucette.
Just a question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Question to you procedurally. If I want to find a way to add the $53,000 into the cost to make sure that it comes up to that standard in case we decide to go, what would be the procedure I would need to follow? If we're going to accept this, do I bring this back at another council meeting, or do I try to put this in as an amendment? This would probably be to Ms. Grieg or...
Subject to the clerk.
Yeah, the clerk, I think.
Comment on this, I would say we would add it to this amendment recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I understand correctly, on page 17 of the report, it talks about the Class C estimate also including an allowance to reinforce the structure to accommodate future solar panels at a cost of $53,000.
$66, yeah.
So I don't believe an amendment to the recommendation is necessary at this point.
It's in the Class C.
So we're covered.
It's in the Class C, so we're covered in it, so I don't need to do anything in it right now. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Elliott.
So we'll vote on the extra $981,000 for that shell-out expansion area as well. That's included in that Class C estimate?
It is not included in the Class C.
And that's what the recommendation is endorse the Class C estimate as prepared. So that's minus that build out of the...
The Class C would have to, we would have to add the shell-out cost to the current estimate.
Council, yeah, I just want to make sure. It says that the Council of the City of Port Colborne endorsed the Class C estimate as presented. So that's minus that shell-out bill.
Correct. The, Mr. Mayor, if I may, the recommendation, what page is that?
3 is on page 21.
On 17. Noted in the Class C estimate was a cost to shell out the future expansion area at $912,000. To add the additional work, the revised estimated net construction cost would increase to $8,575,197. Total construction cost of $11.5 million. So that change would have to be included in the revised estimate if council directed that that portion of the work be done.
That would have to be added into the Class C.
Can I ask you a question on that point? If it increases the construction cost to 8.575, that's the total of 912 plus the 69,279 in additional fees for a total of 981,000 and change. Why does the total construction cost go up 1.2 million? If we're only going up 981 on that shell out, the total cost goes up 1.2.
That's what it says in the report.
So yeah, that's what it says right there. The net construction cost would increase to 857,5197, which is $982,000 more.
Should be 982 plus, as you said, Councillor Elliott, plus the 10,308. Sorry, 7,663. So it should be 11, close to 11,3. So I don't know why we're at 11,5. Do we know?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Elliott. The reason, I guess you're looking at the one paragraph that talks about the additional costs of 11.5, the construction cost 11.5 million. When you look at the Class C estimate, you can't just add the 912,000 plus consultant fees into the Class C, because there are contingencies, design contingency, construction contingency, and also escalation costs that are factored into that Class C estimate. So when you add the 912, you have to add it in before that, and then all those percentages apply to that 912 as well, just to compare apples to apples in the estimate. So
Okay, so what you're saying is the 912 plus the 69,279 in consultants fees is plus another $300,000 on top of that?
there's, yeah, with those percentages, it just adds on to that, just so we have our contingencies.
It's not in the Class C, it has to go in first and then have the percentages added
Okay.
to it. So instead of 11.3, it's 11.5 with the percentages increased.
Can I come back to you, Mr. Elliott?
No, I'm fine. I just want to know that that's not in what we're going to vote on.
Councillor Bodnar.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ron or the consultants, whoever can answer, when do we have to decide on that additional build? Is tonight the night to add that in, if we want to?
I think, through you, Mr. Mayor, I think there's additional time. We're probably at 50 to 60% of the design itself. There's been some preliminary work done on the shell out. Depending on council's direction, we could bring this forward in an additional report if additional information is required. These are the estimates now, and they're strictly based on the Class C estimates, which we feel are quite accurate at this point in time. Keep in mind there's going to be a Class B estimate and also a Class A estimate just prior to the tender itself. So there is a little bit of time in the next month or so to work on some of these numbers or have council deliberate this in more detail if they wish. So certainly that decision wouldn't have to be made tonight, but we're very happy that this particular item can come forward and be considered in the overall project.
Councillor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. One last question for me. We debentured $800,000 for the soft costs to get this started, right? You're now increasing it to 1.6, which means it has doubled. I understand inflationary costs, but if we took that $800,000 in 2012. We're only 3 years away, and it's increased, it's doubled in 3 years. Is that what you're trying to tell us?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the total soft cost of $1.6 million is well in the range on a project of this size. It's at about 11.7%. That's well in the range of 10 to 15% for soft cost on a capital project like this. Some of the scope on the project since 2012 has increased. There's been many changes to the design itself that you see here. We've tried to put some of the verbiage in terms of what those changes were. There's been some actual savings in terms of acoustic report and some of the other things that were looked at, and some of the cost sharing with the region and CNP on those additional projects. We've saved a little bit of money there, but certainly there has been an increase in the overall projected capital cost for the project.
Okay.
But keeping in mind, I think that at 11.7%, it's a very doable number in terms of the actual soft costs for the project.
The one last one then. Does that mean that we need to take an extra $800,000 debenture out this year to pay for that increase? Or do we wait until next year when we start taking all the debentures out? Exactly how does that work out? I'd like Peter to tell me how that works, because we're now talking about an extra $800,000 we hadn't put in the budget. So,
Director Sinnes.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Doucette. The additional $800,000, I would work with engineering as to when those costs are coming due, and essentially I would hold off to at the point of time when we actually require the funds, and then debenture it at that point in time. We were able to, on the first $800,000, I was able to put that off for about a year until such time that we were able to, that we knew that majority of it was spent, and that was this year, then that we put the debenture out. So I would do the same with this. Probably anticipating, I would think probably the spring or spring of 2016. It's, you know, we are able to, with our current cash flow, we are able to keep some of it going just through our current cash flow without having to debenture and incur interest costs. So we'll try to sort of work that out as to the timings.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? There being none, call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item number 3, Mr. Main.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Engineering and Operations, Engineering Division, report number 2015-180, subject Winter Operations Review Committee update.
Is there a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Bodner? Mr. Main, do you want to speak to this?
Yes. Having pulled this item, it gives a chance for council to speak on it. We went, Councillor Damaris and I went to 2 different meetings, and we found out that it's been a horrendous 2 years, last winter, this winter, and it doesn't look like it's going to be any better this winter according to the Farmer's Almanac. But anyway, having taken all that into consideration, I think this is going to have to be a budget issue, because ultimately we spent way more than our budget in 2014, way more than our budget in 2015 for the storms we had and the snow we had and the limitations we had with removing it. We talked about different things like car removal from roads, because this way, you know, the plows have to come down the same road 3 times in order to get to the curb because people leave their cars in the road, things like that. And when you have bylaw that only works 24 to 28 hours a week, it's very, very difficult to tag and tow. And I know there was some issues with the downtown core. It's always been a problem downtown, and that's why I would like to defer this until we get into the budget process, so that we can do it properly and we can do it fairly as far as money goes. Winter operations is very important to town because it cripples everything. It cripples people being able to go to work, people being able to open their businesses and have people come to them, and it has a great effect. So I would like to defer this, if it's possible, for budget, and see if we can put a little bit more money into winter operations.
Councillor, is there a comment, Councillor Hanson, on that, or Director Hanson?
Mr. Mayor, as Councillor Main said, we had 2 meetings. We brought all the staff in, the operations staff that are involved in winter control, as well as the bylaw officers who are in charge of parking and the bylaw enforcement. It was very productive. A lot of good issues come out, as we've tried to outline in the reports and in the meeting minutes. And as Councillor Main said, I think one of the overriding issues, obviously, is vehicles on the road. We're having to bring parking enforcement in on a regular basis to get these vehicles moved, to red tag them. We went through the process on how this is done. We had some good discussions on enforcement, as well as some expectations of what council and the public may require or want to see in terms of snow removal, especially in the downtown core, where we're somewhat limited in terms of resources when we're fighting these storms and keeping the roads open. There's some expectation of removal on sidewalks, clearing intersections throughout the city where people should be able to walk, and items like that will require, as Councillor Main has said, will require additional resources to bring other forces in to do these sorts of things. So it's definitely a good discussion for budget if there's an expectation that there's additional work that should be done beyond what we're doing now under winter control.
Councilor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I along with Councilor Main, did attend those meetings, and I was really quite surprised at just how much is involved in these processes. The amount of information that was sent forward to Councilor Main and I think it took up 40 hours of our life just reading some of it. But it was really unbelievable. And as Mr. Hansen has said, there's more resources needed. There's no question to that. And I would support Councillor Main's request to move this over to budget time when we can look at how much more resource we can give to winter works.
Councillor Elliott, then Councillor Doucette.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Councillor Main and Councillor Desmarais. There's no financial considerations in this at all. This is just a report for information. So to refer it to budget time, we're going to talk about it anyways at budget. I mean, it's just a report that it's just an update. So to defer doesn't really make any sense because it's just an update on a meeting that they had. We're going to talk about it at budget anyways, so I'm just putting it out there that it's not going to do anything to defer it or refer it.
Councillor Doucette? Councillor Elliott, are you?
No, that, yeah.
Councillor Doucette.
I'm in agreement with Councillor Elliott. I see no advantage to referring this, because when it comes to budget time, if we want to increase some of this, we just do it, because budget, when it comes, it's going to be one section of items that we can take a look at. And if we want to, probably what would be more profitable would be to direct Mr. Hansen to make sure that he highlights that in his budget so that we know what's going on, and then we can deal with it that way. But to refer or defer or whatever you want to call this, this just tells us what's working, what's not working, and yeah, okay, let's take a look at it, and it looks like everything's going to be fine. But budget-wise, there's no money tied to this report in any way, shape, or form. So why refer it back to, I don't understand. Someone make me understand that.
Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The wrong terminology may have been used. My intention was to have this report brought back to be read again at budget time. That's all. Because I just think we have to keep it current in our mind to remind us how important it is that we put more resources there.
Councillor Main, do you have any further comment?
Just one quick one. The last part of the recommendation says the staff continue with the current winter operations control measures. That tells me we're going to do it the same as we did it last year. That's what that says to me. So.
Where are you referring to, Councillor Main?
Under the recommendations on page 53. Maybe I'm interpreting this wrong.
Well, maybe perhaps we can do something to satisfy everyone here. Let's say your concern is you don't wish to continue with the current winter operations control measures because that's not acceptable to you.
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, naturally we're going to have to continue with the current winter operations until the budget comes, just in case we get snow next week or November. But to approve something that says the staff will continue with the current winter operations control measures without putting in there that it has to be updated for budget because of the bylaw needing more money, the more people on the road, more service downtown, rather than just do it when it gets 3 feet high. All that kind of stuff costs money, and that's the part that I had concerns with, was the recommendation that says, and the staff will continue the current winter operations control measures. So, change it as you wish.
All right. Would it be better to add in until a subsequent review by the budget or committee? Council? Councilor Bodnar?
Mr. Mayor, on page 52, there's another option there. And if you read it under B, it says that staff would recommend that the items be brought forward to the 2016 budget deliberation. You know, if you want to take the recommendation and change it to other options under B, that's kind of, I think, what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
And Mr. Mayor, through you to Mr. Hanson, if this was passed as is there any reason at budget time that we couldn't change what's going on? If we wanted to add a bunch of stuff, does this lock us into only one way of doing it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there were many, the answer is simply you could certainly bring it up at budget. Through the committee, there were many ideas brought forward to get estimates on the enhanced services that council wants to see during winter control. So all those things can be brought forward during budget. We don't, as the staff, have any current direction from council to enhance anything we're doing. We're putting this in terms of this report. I think that was the intent of the committee, to really take a look at what we do now and see if there was better ways that these things could be done. And certainly, as I said, in other options, it will require additional resources if we're enhancing what we're doing now, because we're running deficits during certain winter seasons, like the last two winters.
Okay, any further comment? And is it the direction of council to make reference to item number 4B of the options? Any comments? Are we going to run with item 4B instead of the recommendation listed?
4B would satisfy me, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Councilor Rodner?
That was way too easy, but I'll accept that.
Then could we have Councilor Main and Councilor Desmarais withdraw their recommendation and to then recommend option 4B?
Absolutely.
So you are prepared to withdraw your recommendation? Yes. Councilor Desmarais as the seconder?
I will as well.
Yeah, certainly. No, we'll let Councilor Doucette first and then...
Yeah. I'm just wondering if just number 4. No, I just noticed something. Sorry. Forget it, yeah.
Nothing?
That says do nothing. No, forget it.
Forget it. Clerk Gregg.
Sorry about that. I missed that part.
Do you have a recommendation, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering if really the intention of, if this could actually be accepted as an amendment to the current recommendation on the floor, and that it really is a staff direction to staff to report back at the budget meeting with regard to enhanced level of service, instead of withdrawing the motion.
And adding paragraph 4B to the recommendation. Mr. Main, do you want to make that recommendation then?
Absolutely.
Seconded by Councilor Desmarais.
Yes.
Any further comments or discussion? Peter, you have a comment?
Through Mr. Mayor, I was just going to comment that would probably be more appropriate, because by the time we get into budget, it'd be January, February, and any recommendations that you would probably make this winter season will be almost over. So any recommendations that come in 26 budget would be for the latter part of the 26 winter season and going into 2016 going into 2017. So like December, January. So I agree with the city clerk that just be added to, so then you're doing both.
Okay, that's understood by everyone. We have the recommendation. We have clause 4B added to it. And I'm going to call the question on that. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Item number 5, Councillor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. As soon as I get focus here. Engineering operations and operations, engineering division report number 2015-182, subject Elizabeth Street and Valley Street intersection. That council received this report for information purposes and no further action be taken.
Is there a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Elliott? You wish to address?
In looking at this, we're hoping that we can have it brought back. We can't do it this evening, but I want everyone to be on notice. There was another accident this weekend. And the accident this weekend, when my wife went by there, because she has to go through there to get home, said that fire truck, the ambulance, everybody was there. So it was another accident again. And when I went this afternoon to bring my grandson into the Y, there were 6 cars on Elizabeth Street on both sides waiting. So the increase in traffic is there. And that's what we're concerned about, and that's what the neighborhood is concerned about. But I just wanted to comment on it for now, but we're hoping to revisit the whole issue. But there is a process that has to happen, and we cannot do it this evening. But we're hoping that soon we'll be able to bring it back, and we will discuss that again. But again, I mean, in what, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, we've had 2 accidents. Plus, that's not counting the ones that haven't been reported, by the way, okay? Because there's a whole bunch of them that aren't reported, that are little bumper things, and the 2 people talk to each other and boom, it's done, and that's it. There's a lot of those going on right now. A lot of those going on. But thank you very much for that, Mr. Henson, and we will be revisiting again.
Mr. Henson, do you wish to make a comment?
Mr. Mayor, just following up on our last meeting, you had directed that we review the collision information. We've done that. We've spoke to the region in terms of reports, ensuring that we didn't miss anything. And the only comment I can make is the same comment I made at the last meeting. The collision rate is fairly low, just over 1 per year. We've had 2 in the last 6 weeks, but the one in August was the first one since 2011. So the collision rate would not warrant a 4-way stop at the intersection.
Now let's call a question on item number 5. All those in favor? Let me see your hands again in favor. All those opposed? That's carried. Final item is item number 11. Mr. Elliott, that is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Town of Niagara Lake reclosing of schools in small rural and northern communities. Request to join Community Schools Alliance, the CSA.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Doucette. Comments, gentlemen? Councillor Elliott first.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just a couple of comments, questions, and I'm not exactly sure who can answer them through staff. It says that we donate on a per capita basis to the Community Schools Alliance. I don't know who the Community Schools Alliance is. What does the money go for? Who administrates the finances of them? And they're looking for us either to join or not to join, so we got to make a decision. But I don't know who we're giving the money to, who looks after it, and what do they do with the money. So if anybody can answer any of those, that'd be great.
Councillor Doucette, and then we'll move on to Councillor Bodnar.
Well, I'm looking at this, And I'm wondering, why is a city, according to the Education Act, we have nothing at all, and we were told that, by the way, when we were dealing with planning 3 or 4 months ago, when now we have an action going on. The school board and the school system does what they want. We as a city have no control at all of any kind, none. Therefore, why would we join a group that's sort of like school board type when we have no control over what it is? It doesn't make sense to me. It's not logical. We're going to give them money to do what, as Councillor Elliott said. We're going to give them money, and who controls it and what's it for, we don't know. But we have no control over any of it. So why are we even looking at this?
If you would read the motion for the town of Niagara Lakes, it's basically would appear to me to be a lobby group to lobby the provincial government to amend the Education Act to allow municipalities to have input on school closures.
Yes, but
that's my...
Yeah. No, I don't disagree with you. I read it, and I think that's what it is. But cities have been trying to do that for years. The Ontario government, whatever party is there, has totally ignored it and gone the other way with it constantly. So therefore, I don't see a sense of it and a need for it.
Thank you. Councillor Biden.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a suggestion that this be brought up at budget time, and that the Community Schools Alliance could provide us with some more information, maybe at that time just saying what they plan to do, how the money's controlled and everything, and we can make a decision at that time for the 2016 year rather than 2015.
So you're prepared to make a motion to defer consideration of this issue until...
To budget?
To budget.
Yeah, and that'll imply that'll be for 2016, I would think, yeah.
You're a seconder for that recommendation, Councillor Maine, I guess. Any further discussion required? Thank you. So that's what we'll do. Are there any notices of motion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Any notice of motion, Madam Clerk?
None this evening from me, Mr. Mayor, although members of council may have some.
Any notice of motion from any member of council? That being no to that question or inquiry, then I consider a motion for adjournment. Councillor Danch. Seconder? Meeting adjourned. For the motion, yep. Moving on. I'd like to call to order a regular meeting of council number 3115 on Tuesday, October 13th, 2015. Are there any addendum items, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. None this evening.
I would seek a motion to confirm the agenda. Is there a motion by Councillor Kenny, seconded by Councillor Desmarais? Are there any disclosures of interest? There being none indicated, the minutes so note. Adoption of minutes of the special meeting of council 28-15 held on September 28th, 2015, and the regular meeting of council 29-15 held on September 28th, 2015. Councillor Doucette. Seconder, Councillor Bodner. Any comments or discussion? There being none, call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Determination of items requiring separate discussion. There being none, I'd call for approval of the items not requiring separate discussion. Moved by Councillor Danch, seconded by Councillor Kenny. Any comments or discussion? Call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Are there any proclamations this evening, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, none this evening.
Item number 10 on our agenda, minutes of boards, commissions, and committees. Is the minutes of the Senior Citizens Advisory Council meetings of February 19th, March 19th, April 16th, May 21st, June 18th, and July 16th. Call for a motion to accept those minutes. Moved by Councillor Kenny, seconded by Councillor Desmarais. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Minutes of the Port Colborne Historical and Marine Museum Board of Management, meeting of July 21st, 2015. Councillor Elliott, you wish to move that minute, or move those minutes approval? Seconder, Councillor Kenny. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Consideration of bylaws. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, that the following bylaws be read and passed. Bylaw 6291-11715 being a bylaw to establish fees for certain services provided by Port Colborne Fire and Emergency Services and to repeal bylaw 4983-3907. Bylaw 6292-11815 being a bylaw to authorize entering into a development agreement for the property municipally known as 5685 Mitchell Road. And finally, bylaw 6293-11915 being a bylaw to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne at its regular meeting of October 13th, 2015.
Call for a motion to approve those bylaws, pass those bylaws in mass, all of them together. Councillor Danch, seconded by Councillor Bodnar. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. At this time, I request a motion to go into closed session. Councillor Kenny, seconded by Councillor Doucette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, that council do now proceed into closed session in order to address the following matters. A, the minutes of the closed session portion of September 14, 2015 council meeting. B, Chief Administrative Officer, Special Projects and Corporate Strategic Initiatives Report 2015-83 regarding ongoing lease agreement negotiations pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001, subsection 239(2)C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. C, a memorandum from Tammy Morden, Human Resources Coordinator, dated October 13, 2015, concerning Port Colborne professional firefighter negotiations pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001, 239(2)D, labor relations or employee negotiations. And finally, D, memorandum from Dan Aquilina, Director of Planning Development, dated October 7th, concerning a matter of potential litigation pursuant to Municipal Act, subsection 239(2)E, litigation or potential litigation including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or the local board.
Do we have a mover and seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Main, seconded by Councillor Desmarais. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. I appreciate your presence and input on the discussions.